Go away, you useless wife who can't even do chores. I sat on the floor, feeling small and insulted, while my mother-in-law stared at me angrily. We don't need you. You always look sad. You're just a burden. My sister-in-law, who never helps at home, said mean things. Wait a second, Morris. Your mom and sister are being too mean. I tried to say, but before I could finish, even my husband Mauricio looked disappointed in me. My mom and sister are right. I don't need a wife who can't do chores and work. I have a young girl who helps part-time and is much better. Pack your things and leave, Mauricio said firmly. All three of them kept saying hurtful things, calling me a bad wife. I clenched my fists, feeling angry. After using me all this time, how could they be so mean? Just you wait. I'll make sure you all get what's coming to you. But I looked at the three of them and said without changing my expression, fine, I'll leave. The family that's been putting everything on me will see what happens next. My name's Eleanor. I'm 32 and a working wife. Nowadays, many women work after getting married. And I've kept working at the same company I joined after finishing college because I enjoy it. One morning, while I was getting ready for work, Mauricio asked me, "Hey Eleanor, can you handle this? Tax season is coming," and he handed me a bunch of receipts and invoices. Again, "You should handle the shop's accounting." Mauricio avoided eye contact. "You know I'm better at it, so please." I married Mauricio 5 years ago. He used to work at a restaurant where I'd sometimes go. After a few dates, we decided to get married. Now, Mauricio has his own cafe, but he leaves all the boring tasks like buying things and accounting to me. As I headed out the door, my mother-in-law said, "Eleanor, I want Chinese food tonight. Can you get the ingredients?" "No, you can do it when you get back. Also, Vivian and the kids are coming this weekend. Make sure you cook something they'll like," I reluctantly replied before leaving the house. When we got married, I wanted to live just with Mauricio, but he said we should live with his mom because he was worried about her being alone. So we moved to his big family house. My mother-in-law isn't good at cleaning, and the place was a mess when we moved in. She gets money from her pension but spends most of it eating out because she doesn't like cooking. Mauricio always says that housework is a woman's job, so even though I work too, I have to do all the chores for everyone in the family. On top of that, my sister-in-law, Vivian, who moved out after getting married, often comes back home with her kids. When she's here, I have even more work to do. This morning, when I heard she's coming back this weekend, I thought, oh no, not again. And then the dreaded weekend comes. I'd love to relax on my days off from work, but instead I have to take care of Vivian's kids and cook while rushing around. Vivian drops a big news on me. "Eleanor, by the way, I'm getting divorced and moving back here with the kids next month. Just so you know." "What? Are you serious? Got a problem with that?" No, that must be hard for you. When are you moving back?" "As soon as I can." My sister-in-law is coming home with her kids. At first, I'm surprised, but then I think it might be good because Vivian used to be a housewife, so she might help with the chores. That would make my life easier. Even though we're not very close, I hope for less work and go on with my days. But I quickly realized I was wrong. Vivian, just like her mom, doesn't do anything. She spends all day watching TV and eating snacks. She doesn't work or help around the house. Her laziness with chores was one of the reasons for her divorce. Now I have to do all the chores, even making meals for her fussy kids and getting them ready for school. As time goes on, my job gets busier with a new project needing more hours and early mornings. The house gets messier and messier. Coming home to a messy house is really disappointing, but everyone keeps asking, "When's dinner?" Or saying, "You're so slow." To make things worse, Vivian and my mother-in-law start making rude comments. "Eleanor, the laundry is piling up. Just because you work doesn't mean you can be lazy. But I'm busy too." When I try to explain, Vivian interrupts, talking back to your mother-in-law. "You're so brave, Eleanor, and you've been buying all the meals. That's not good for the kids. If you're home, can't you help a little?" What are you saying? Mauricio owns a business. You don't have to work. You're just selfish. So be a perfect wife. I couldn't believe it, and they acted like it was normal. That night, I was so mad I could burst. So I talked to Mauricio. "I'm busy with work, and neither your mom nor your sister is helping with the chores. Are you saying bad things about my mom and sister Eleanor?" Mauricio looked at me angrily. I said surprised, "No, that's not it. But I can't do all the chores alone." Could you help me a bit? I'm busy with my business. You might not get it because you have an easy job in an office, but running a business is tough. And isn't housework a wife's job? Don't expect me to help. Are you serious? Mauricio just goes to sleep, leaving me upset. But then I get an idea. I think of something good. I quickly grab my phone and order some things online before going to bed. A few days later, a bunch of new gadgets arrive. A machine that washes and dries clothes, a robot that cleans, and kitchen tools that cook by themselves. If no one's going to help me, I'll use these gadgets to make my chores easier. While the delivery guys bring in the new washer, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law arrive. You bought a new washer without asking. The old one still works. But it's old, and this will make laundry faster and easier, I argue. What's all this? A cleaning robot and cooking gadgets. Eleanor, come here. They call me to the living room, where they're sitting on the sofa, and I'm told to sit on the floor. Mauricio is there too, sitting with his mom, looking pleased. What's happening? I ask. My mother-in-law yells. What do you mean? What's happening? You spent all this money on lazy gadgets with the household money. What were you thinking? I thought it would help with chores. It's not about helping. People these days rely too much on machines, my sister-in-law adds. Exactly, Eleanor. And those are fancy items. The ones we have still work. You're just wasting money because Mauricio owns a business. She stares at me, and Mauricio agrees. But you're just making things easier for yourself. Can't you even do chores properly? I wanted to reply, look who's talking, but I stayed quiet. Finally, my mother-in-law, maybe tired of my quietness, snaps. If you can't do chores properly, you should leave. I stare at her in surprise. She stares back at me. We don't need you. Mauricio and I can manage without you. You always seem tired and unhappy. You're just a burden. My sister-in-law says like she's had enough. Hold on, Mauricio. Your mom and sister are being too mean. When I look to Mauricio for support, he looks down at me and says, they're right. I don't need a wife who can't handle chores. I look at Mauricio in shock, but he just smirks. I'm a business owner and I can spend my money however I want. I don't need a wife who spends it to make her life easier. Why would you say that? And I've been getting along with a young part-time helper. She's pretty, unlike you. Pack your things and go. Shocked by Mauricio's words, all three start criticizing me, saying I'm a bad wife. I clench my fists in anger. After using me for so long, they say this to me. Just you wait. I'll make you sorry, but I stayed calm and said, okay, I'll go. Good will be better without you, my mother-in-law said meanly, and I quietly stood up and put something on the table. Mauricio, let's get divorced. It was a form for divorce that I had prepared earlier. Tired of everything. Okay, I'll sign it. But don't regret it later. Mauricio signed the papers, and I packed my bags and moved to a temporary apartment the same day. No one said goodbye to me. I handed in the divorce papers at City Hall and rented a new place. At the same time, I accepted a promotion at work that I had been turning down because of housework, and I became a department head. I was able to move forward in my career, which I had almost given up on, and I focused more and more on my job. Happy that nobody was there to hold me back, I felt relieved about a week after leaving. My ex-mother-in-law started calling, but I was busy and didn't want to talk to someone who had called me worthless. I kept ignoring her calls. A year later, on a day when I wasn't working, she called again. Thinking it was time to sort things out, I answered, hello? Ah, Eleanor, you finally picked up. Why did you ignore me for over a year? What do you want? Well, how are you? Are you okay? I replied honestly, I'm doing great. Working hard in my own place. I got a better job and more money. I'm living well. Really? Would you think about coming back? She sounded almost desperate, and I asked, surprised, why now? We're having problems. We're running out of money. I couldn't help but smile as I said, oh? Mauricio's cafe isn't even making $11,000 in profit. Huh. And neither you nor your daughter are working. So that makes sense. Eleanor, you knew. Yes, I knew. Mauricio's cafe was only making about $800 a month in profit. I handled the money, so of course I knew. Mauricio's cafe was only making about $800 a month in profit. I handled the money, so of course I knew. Mauricio acted like a big business owner but didn't manage things properly or take care of customers. So he probably didn't know. Of course I knew. I was the one doing all the money stuff and keeping track of what we had. What? Why didn't you tell us? I didn't know you were a big manager at a company and giving so much money for us to live. Yeah, I was giving over $3,000 every month. That's how we all managed. I was adding my money to help because I knew Mauricio's shop wasn't making much. Maybe Mauricio realized he couldn't handle things without my money after I left. Please, Eleanor, come back. Oh, by the way, what happened to Mauricio's shop? Ignoring my ex-mother-in-law's request, I asked, is Mauricio's shop closing next month? Even the part-time helper left him. It's not surprising with such bad management, he can't run a business. And he's too proud to do what he needs to do. No woman would want to be with a man like that. I laughed, and my ex-mother-in-law didn't know what to say. Can we finish? I'm busy, she quickly said. Also, the house has been a mess since you left. She said the house was a mess because no one was cleaning. The house was messy. Nobody was cooking, so they had to buy meals, and they couldn't even buy a new washing machine. It would have been nice if you left those machines, ex-mother-in-law says. What are you saying? Those lazy machines? And why can't I take what I paid for? I shouldn't have said that, but I never thought the house would get like this just because nobody was doing chores, I said, getting a bit annoyed. Isn't it strange that 3 grown-ups can't handle chores? What are your daughter and Mauricio doing? She whispered. Well, Mauricio is sitting at home all day, doing nothing since he found out his shop isn't making money. He said he could spend his money however he wanted because he's a business owner. And Vivian won't work, no matter what I say. She doesn't do chores. And she even asks me for money for herself and her kids. My pension is running out. Really? Your daughter told me she didn't need me because she had you, I said coldly. My ex-mother-in-law tried to be nice again. Please, Eleanor, my pension isn't enough for us anymore. I don't want to go back to that house. Your children are quite the freeloaders, aren't they? She didn't know what to say. As I was about to end the call, she kept talking. Eleanor, will change. Please come back. Let's all be happy together again. Sure, be happy with a useless wife, I interrupted, and she struggled with her words but kept begging. I'm sorry for what I said. We're family. Help us. We can't even pay the taxes for the house. We'll have to sell it. I don't have to help you, and I don't want to. Figure it out yourselves. Goodbye from your useless wife. I hung up and blocked her number, ignoring her cries. Sipping my coffee in my tidy apartment, I chuckled. 3 months later, I happened to walk past Mauricio's cafe. It was closed. Even their house was sold. According to a neighbor I met, they sold the house and moved to a small apartment nearby. They caused trouble in the neighborhood, always fighting and making a mess. People complained a lot. They could have worked hard and taken care of their home. But they didn't, which wasn't surprising. I looked at their old house and walked away. Since then, I've focused on my work. Recently, a nice colleague told me he liked me, saying, I love how you work so hard. Let's date and maybe get married. I think my next marriage isn't far off, and this time, I'm excited to find happiness.
Clara exhaled heavily as she folded the last piece of laundry in their cramped apartment. It had been a grueling day at school, and all she longed for was a quiet evening. Reaching for Mark's jacket to toss it in the wash, her hand stilled. A crumpled envelope peeked out of the pocket. Curiosity tugged at her, and she pulled it free, smoothing out the creases. Her heart sank. Eviction notice. The bold red letters at the top hit her like a punch to the chest. The letter spelled out that they were 3 months behind on rent. Clara's mind raced. How could this have happened? She had trusted Mark to handle the bills while she managed their household. Mark, she called, her voice trembling, not with anger, but fear. Mark appeared in the doorway, his easy smile fading as soon as he saw the paper in her hands. What's this? Clara demanded, her voice unsteady. Mark hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign of his nervousness. I can explain, he began, but Clara cut him off. Explain what? That we're about to lose our home? That you've been hiding this from me for months? Mark stepped forward, reaching for the notice. Clara, listen, it's not what you think. I had to help Sophia. She needed money for the kids' school fees, and then the car broke down. Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. You gave our rent money to your sister? She's been struggling since her husband passed, Mark said defensively. I couldn't just let her go under. Clara's anger surged. So instead, you decided to let us go under? She waved the notice in his face. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or were you planning to wait until we were out on the street? Mark tried to take her hands, but she pulled away. I was going to fix it, he said, his voice quieter now. I've been working extra hours. I thought I could catch up before it got this far. Fix it? Clara repeated, her voice rising. With what money, Mark? Our savings are gone, aren't they? Mark's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Clara turned away, her thoughts spiraling. Their home, their life, it all felt like a lie. And for what? So Sophia could keep up appearances? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Sophia herself. Can't wait for family dinner tomorrow. Love you both. The irony stung, and Clara let out a bitter laugh. Sophia, who was supposedly struggling, had time to plan dinners while they faced eviction. I can fix this, Mark said again, his voice pleading now. I just need more time. Clara stared at him, the man she'd married 5 years ago, now a stranger. You made your choice, Mark, she said coldly. And it wasn't me. Mark froze in the doorway as Clara turned back to the laundry. She didn't know how they would get through this, but one thing was certain, the trust between them had shattered. The next morning, Clara woke early. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the events of the night before. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, glaring at her like a bad omen. She sipped her coffee, staring at it, her thoughts a tangled mess. How had they gotten to this point? Had she been blind to Mark's actions, too trusting to see the warning signs? Mark was still asleep, or pretending to be. Clara didn't care. She needed space. Grabbing her bag, she left the apartment, letting the door slam behind her. Her destination was clear, Tina. Tina's office was in the heart of downtown Portland. Clara had barely texted her friend a brief summary of the situation before Tina called back, her tone sharp and concerned. Get here. Now. When Clara arrived, Tina was waiting outside, leaning against the building with 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. This better be a joke, Tina said, handing one to Clara as they started walking. I wish it was, Clara muttered. She recounted everything, the eviction notice, the drained savings, Mark's excuses, and Sophia's constant demands. Tina listened silently, her expression darkening with every word. When Clara finished, Tina stopped walking and turned to face her. You're telling me Mark gave away your savings without telling you? While you're working yourself to the bone to keep things afloat? Yes, Clara whispered. Saying it out loud only made the betrayal cut deeper. Tina sighed, shaking her head. This isn't just a bad decision, Clara. It's a betrayal. He didn't even give you a chance to weigh in, he just took from you. Clara's throat tightened. I keep asking myself why he didn't trust me enough to tell me. I could have helped figure something out. Because he didn't want to hear no, Tina said bluntly. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, especially when he's trying to please Sophia. The mention of Sophia made Clara's blood boil. She's been living with us for months, Tina. Months? I thought she was trying to get back on her feet, Clara said, her voice tight. But now it feels like she's just using us, and Mark's letting her. Tina gave her a long look. You need to figure out where your line is, Clara. What's the limit before you've had enough? Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure where her limit was yet, but she knew she was getting close. That evening, Clara returned home to find Sophia sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The television blared a reality show in the background, and the faint smell of popcorn lingered in the air. Her 2 young children darted around the living room, toys scattered everywhere. Clara. Sophia called brightly, as if everything was fine. Dinner's almost ready. Hope you don't mind, I used that fancy pasta you bought last week. The kids were craving something special. Clara clenched her jaw. Fancy pasta. The same pasta she and Mark had been saving for a rare date night. Forcing a tight smile, she replied, no problem, and walked into the kitchen, where Mark was stirring a pot on the stove. He looked up, guilt etched across his face. Clara, not now, she cut him off. her voice sharp. She grabbed a glass of water and left, ignoring the tension that clung to the air like a storm cloud. The next day, Clara sat in her classroom during her lunch break, staring at her phone. A notification had popped up from Sophia's Instagram account. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The post showed Sophia's kids in brand new outfits, holding shopping bags from an upscale mall. The caption read, "Fresh start, new beginnings, so blessed." Clara's stomach churned. How could Sophia flaunt expensive purchases while they were on the brink of eviction? Frustration bubbled up inside her, and she texted Tina immediately, "Wine, my place, tonight." Tina arrived that evening with 2 bottles of red wine and a grim expression. As Clara vented, pouring out the details of Sophia's latest outrage, Tina shook her head. "She's bragging about her life on Instagram while draining yours? And Mark just stands by and lets her?" "Exactly," Clara exclaimed. "Then stop letting him," Tina said firmly, pouring Clara a generous glass of wine. "You don't owe them anything, Clara. If they're going to treat you like a doormat, it's time to show them the door." Clara stared at the swirling wine in her glass. Tina was right, but it wasn't that simple. She had loved Mark. She had trusted him. Letting go of their life together wasn't a decision she could take lightly. The family dinner the following evening was everything Clara had expected, and worse. Sophia arrived early with a casserole dish, immediately taking charge of the kitchen as if it were her home. Mark hovered around her, eager to help and hanging on her every word. Sophia played the role of the grieving widow, her children once again the center of attention. Clara sat through it all in silence, her appetite gone. She listened as Sophia's mother, Linda, praised Mark for being such a good brother and scolded Clara for not being more understanding of family struggles. Finally, Clara had enough. She set her fork down with a sharp clink and looked directly at Sophia. "Do you want to tell everyone the truth, or should I?" The room fell silent. Sophia blinked, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" "I mean the truth about where the money really went, the shopping, the trips, the expensive meals," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "The money Mark took from me to give to you." Linda gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Mark's face drained of color, and he looked as though he wanted to disappear. Sophia's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Clara pulled her phone from her pocket, opened the screenshots of Sophia's Instagram posts, and slid it across the table. "Don't you? Because this doesn't look like someone who's struggling." Sophia glanced at the screen, her face pale. I was going to pay it back," she stammered. "When?" Clara demanded. "After we were homeless? You've been lying to us this whole time, Sophia, using your kids as an excuse to live off us while we fall apart." Linda tried to interject, but Clara held up a hand. "No, Linda, you don't get to lecture me about family loyalty when your daughter has been stealing from me." The table was silent. Clara stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm done," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let you drag me down with you." Without waiting for a response, she walked out, leaving them to sit in the mess they had created. Back at the apartment, Clara began packing her things. She didn't know what her next step would be, but one thing was certain: she couldn't stay. As she folded clothes into a suitcase, Mark appeared in the doorway, his voice heavy with emotion. "Clara, please don't do this. We can fix it." She looked at him, the man she had once loved so deeply, now a stranger. "You made your choice, Mark," she said quietly, "and it wasn't me." Mark's shoulders slumped as Clara zipped up her suitcase. The weight of his betrayal hung heavy between them, and Clara knew it was a burden she could no longer carry. Tina placed a steady hand on Clara's shoulder. "You're not walking away, Clara, you're rebuilding. Trust me, this time, you're going to build something so much stronger." The next day, Clara's phone buzzed with a message from Mark. It was brief and to the point. "Can we talk? Just us." Clara stared at the text for a long moment, her emotions swirling in a storm of anger, sadness, and curiosity. Part of her wanted to ignore it entirely. Another part, the part that remembered the man she'd fallen in love with, wanted answers. After a deep breath, she typed back, "Fine, tomorrow, at the park." The following afternoon, Clara arrived early at the park. She sat on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, her hands stuffed in her coat pockets as the chilly Portland air nipped at her cheeks. She watched children laughing and playing on the nearby playground, their joy a bittersweet reminder of simpler times. Mark arrived a few minutes later, looking tired and disheveled. His once pristine appearance had given way to wrinkled clothes and a shadow of stubble. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly, sitting beside her. Clara didn't respond right away. She kept her gaze on the playground, watching a father push his daughter on a swing. Finally, she turned to Mark, her expression hard. "What do you want?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "I messed up, Clara, I know I did. I should have told you about the money, the bills, everything. I thought I could fix it on my own." "By lying to me?" Clara shot back, her voice sharp. "By taking our savings without even asking?" Mark flinched as if her words physically struck him. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I was just trying to help. Sophia, she's been through so much, losing her husband, raising 2 kids alone." "And what about me, Mark?" Clara interrupted, her voice rising. "What about us? Do you think this hasn't been hard for me too? I was your partner, you were supposed to trust me. Instead, you chose to betray me." "I didn't see it that way," Mark said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "For who?" Clara asked, her eyes narrowing. "Because it sure wasn't for us." Mark looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he admitted. "I let my guilt over Sophia's situation cloud my judgment. I put her needs above yours, above ours. And I'm sorry." Clara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Mark. Sorry doesn't pay the rent or undo the damage you've done." "I know," Mark said, his voice earnest, "but I want to make it right. I've started therapy. I've been talking to my boss about taking on extra work to pay back what I took. I'm trying, Clara." Clara stared at him, searching his face for a glimpse of the man she had once trusted implicitly. She could see the regret in his eyes, but regret wasn't enough. Trust, once broken, wasn't so easily repaired. "I appreciate that you're trying," she said finally, "but I don't know if I can forgive you for this." Mark nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting her response. "I understand, but I'm not giving up on us, Clara, not yet." Clara didn't reply. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. But another part, the part that had been betrayed, wasn't ready to let go of her anger. Later that evening, Clara returned to the apartment for the first time in days. Mark wasn't home, but Sophia was. She sat on the couch, her children playing quietly on the floor. When Clara walked in, Sophia looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Clara," Sophia said hesitantly, standing as if to greet her, "can we talk?" Clara crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "What is there to talk about, Sophia? You've already said enough with your actions." Sophia wrung her hands nervously. "I know I've messed up. I know I've taken advantage of you and Mark. And I'm sorry." "Are you?" Clara asked coldly, "because it didn't seem like you were sorry when you were posting pictures of your shopping trips and new clothes while we were struggling to keep a roof over our heads." Sophia winced, her shoulders slumping. "I was trying to keep up appearances. After Tom died, I didn't know how to handle everything, the bills, the kids, the loneliness. It all felt like too much, so I made bad choices. Bad choices that hurt other people," Clara said, her tone unyielding. "Do you even realize the position you've put us in?" "I do now," Sophia said, her voice cracking. "I've been selfish, and I see that now. I want to make things right, Clara." Clara studied her sister-in-law for a long moment. There was sincerity in Sophia's voice, but Clara wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. "Then start by fixing your own life," Clara said firmly. "Stop expecting others to carry you while you drag them down, because I'm done." Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I will, I promise." Clara didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked to her room, shutting the door behind her. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace, not from reconciliation, but from drawing her boundaries and reclaiming her space. Sophia stood with tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with sincerity. "I will, Clara, I promise I'll make things right." Clara stared at her, unsure whether to believe the words. Sophia had always been good at playing the victim, but this time there was something different in her tone, something genuine. "We'll see," Clara said finally, her voice steady. "Actions speak louder than words. Sophia, if you really want to make things right, show me." Sophia nodded, wiping her tears. "I will, I promise." That night, Clara sat alone in the apartment, her mind racing. The confrontation with Sophia had left her drained but also strangely hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, things could change, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Promises were easy to make, but much harder to keep. As she stared out the window at the city lights, Clara realized one thing with clarity: she needed to prioritize herself. She couldn't keep sacrificing her happiness and stability for others. It was time to take control of her own life. With a renewed sense of determination, she picked up her phone and started making a plan. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: no one else would dictate her path again. A week later, Clara sat in the corner booth of a small coffee shop in downtown Portland, a familiar spot from her marriage to Mark. This time, however, the visit felt different. She had requested to meet him here, not to rekindle anything, but to find closure for the unresolved. Mark arrived a few minutes late, his shoulders slightly hunched, his expression weary. He spotted Clara and gave her a hesitant wave before approaching the table. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. Clara nodded, folding her hands on the table. "Hey." The silence between them was heavy. Clara studied him for a moment. He looked thinner, older, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. It wasn't anger she felt toward him anymore, just a quiet sadness. "I wanted to talk about what happens next," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "It's time to make decisions." Mark nodded, his eyes dropping to the coffee cup in front of him. "I get it. I've been thinking about it too. I've been staying at a motel for now, but I found a roommate situation that's more permanent." Clara raised her eyebrows. "A roommate?" "Yeah," Mark said softly. "I need to figure out who I am without everything else, without Mom's influence, without Sophia leaning on me. I've started therapy too." "That's a good step," Clara said, surprised by his candor. Mark met her gaze for the first time. "I know I can't undo what I've done, Clara, but I want you to know I'm sorry for breaking your trust, for not putting you first, for all of it." Clara nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Mark, but this isn't just about apologies, it's about actions. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if I'm tied to this mess." Mark looked away, his jaw tightening. "Does that mean you're filing for divorce?" Clara exhaled. She had thought long and hard about this. "Yes," she said finally, "it's what's best for both of us. We need to start over separately." Mark nodded, his expression pained but accepting. "I understand. I don't want to hold you back anymore." For the first time in months, Clara felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. The decision, though painful, felt right. A week later, Clara was back at the apartment, boxing up her belongings. Mark had already moved out, leaving her the space to pack in peace. Sophia and her kids had left too, opting to stay with Linda temporarily. The quiet was both eerie and comforting. As she packed, Clara found an envelope tucked into one of the kitchen drawers. It was addressed to her, the handwriting unmistakably Sophia's. She opened it cautiously, expecting yet another apology. Instead, she found a check and a short note. "Clara, I know this doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I've been working and saving, and I'm going to pay back every cent I owe you. Thank you for being the one who forced me to wake up. You didn't have to, but you did. I'll never forget it. Sophia." Clara stared at the check, her emotions a mix of surprise and disbelief. It wasn't a large amount, but it was a step, a tangible effort to repair the damage. Months passed. Clara moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, closer to her school. The space was modest but cozy, filled with sunlight and the hum of new beginnings. She began focusing on herself for the first time in years, rediscovering hobbies she had once loved, like painting and hiking. Tina remained her constant support, their friendship growing even stronger. One evening, as Clara sat on her balcony, sketching the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Tina. "You're going to want to see this. Check Sophia's Instagram." Clara hesitated before opening the app. Sophia had been quiet on social media for months, but her latest post showed her kids at a park, smiling wide as they played. The caption read, "Starting fresh, new job, new outlook, grateful for second chances." Clara stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe, just maybe, Sophia was turning things around. A year after everything had fallen apart, Clara found herself back at the same coffee shop, but this time for a different reason. She was meeting Tina to celebrate a milestone, her promotion to department head at her school. As Clara sipped her coffee, she thought about how far she had come. The pain of betrayal had lessened, replaced by a quiet strength. She no longer felt defined by the mistakes of others. Instead, she had rebuilt her life on her terms. "Here's to starting over," Tina said, raising her mug in a toast. Clara clinked her mug against Tina's, a genuine smile on her face. "Here's to growth." Outside the coffee shop, the city buzzed with life. Clara watched as people hurried past, each carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, no longer burdened by the weight of betrayal. She was free to embrace the future, a future she had built with her own strength and determination.
My name is Emma Chen, and my story begins with dirt under my fingernails and the delicate scent of lilies floating on the air. My little flower shop, Blooming Dreams, was nestled between the towering skyscrapers of downtown Seattle, a vibrant burst of life amidst the gray monotony of steel and concrete. Another orchid gave up the ghost. I asked Sarah, my sole employee, as she gingerly removed a wilted plant from the front display. "Third one this week," she replied with a weary sigh, her brow furrowed. "Maybe it's time to stop stocking them." I shook my head, taking the plant from her hands with care. "No, we just need to figure out what's wrong and adjust their care. Every plant can thrive with the right attention." That belief had been my guiding principle since childhood. Growing up in rural China, I spent endless hours in my grandmother's garden, absorbing the unspoken language of plants. While other children played with toys, I buried myself in the intricacies of cultivation and the mysteries of hybridization. "Emma, you have magic in your hands," my grandmother would say as she watched me coax sickly plants back to life. "Remember, the strongest flowers bloom in the harshest conditions." At the time, her words seemed abstract. Now they were the foundation of my life. My journey to America began with a scholarship to study botanical sciences. The transition was far from easy: new culture, new language, and an unrelenting need to prove myself. Yet, like the wildflowers I admired, I thrived in unlikely soil. That's how I met James Wheeler. He stumbled literally into my life during my final year of grad school. Rushing to a business meeting, he barreled into my research greenhouse, scattering soil samples everywhere. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, crouching to gather the mess. "I wasn't watching where Whoa, what are these?" His gaze landed on my pride and joy. Hybrid roses I'd spent months perfecting. Their deep purple petals glimmered with silver edges as though dusted with moonlight. "They're my thesis project," I said, hastily inspecting the blooms for damage. "I'm developing resilient varieties for urban environments." "They're stunning," he murmured, and for the first time, I really saw him. Tall, sharp-suited, with warm eyes and a disarming smile. "I'm James, by the way, and I think you just saved my day. I need a unique gift for a client." I sold him 3 roses that day. A week later, he returned, not for flowers, but to ask me to dinner. Our love grew like a well-tended garden, steady, natural, and full of discovery. James worked in corporate finance, a world of sharp suits and strategic deals. But he appreciated the artistry of my work, and I began to admire the structure in his. "You see the world differently than anyone I've ever known," he told me one evening as we strolled through a botanical garden. A year later, we married in a simple ceremony adorned with flowers I'd grown just for the occasion. It was perfect until I met his family. The warning signs appeared early, at our engagement dinner. James's mother, Victoria Wheeler, scrutinized me with icy precision, while his sister Patricia barely hid her smirks. "A florist?" Victoria asked, her voice laden with disbelief. "I thought you said she studied sciences, James." "She has a master's in botanical sciences," James defended. "Emma's work is revolutionary." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Yes, but surely you won't continue with that little hobby after the wedding? The Wheeler name has certain standards." James tensed beside me, but I held my ground, recalling my grandmother's words. "Actually," I said evenly, "I'm opening my own shop after graduation. The lease is already signed." The silence was deafening. Patricia raised an eyebrow, her lips curling. "A shop? How entrepreneurial." "Well," Victoria sighed, "every family has its quirks. Just keep it discreet, dear." James squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't speak up. It was the first crack in our otherwise perfect world. Over the next 2 years, I channeled my energy into my shop, a labor of love that Victoria despised. What none of them knew, not even James, was that I had a plan. During my master's program, I developed patented hybrids, disease-resistant, longer-lasting varieties that could thrive anywhere. Suppliers showed interest, but I played my cards close. "Emma, you've got to see this." Sarah burst into my office one morning, brandishing her tablet. Wheeler Corp just announced a sustainable luxury hotel initiative with rooftop gardens. I smiled, setting down my pruning shears. My in-laws had no idea that their grand vision was about to intersect with mine. That evening, James came home beaming. "Did you hear about the announcement? Dad's been working on this for months. It's going to transform the company." "That's wonderful," I said, arranging a bouquet of my special roses. "Mom's hosting a dinner to celebrate this weekend," he added hesitantly. "They want us there." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure your mother wants the shopkeeper at her event?" He ran a hand through his hair, his telltale sign of unease. "They're trying, Emma, please." Reluctantly, I agreed. That night, as I finalized a deal that would secure my hybrid's future, I received an email that made me smile. Everything was falling into place. The dinner was held at the Wheeler estate, a mansion dripping with opulence and thinly veiled contempt. Victoria greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How's your shop, dear?" Still managing to scrape by. The room chuckled politely. Patricia, now a senior executive, smirked into her glass. "It's quaint, really," she added. "We're working with top-tier experts for the hotel gardens, far beyond the scope of a retail shop." I smiled, unbothered. If only they knew. The dinner unfolded with its usual symphony of veiled barbs and carefully crafted insults. James remained uncomfortably quiet, his occasional apologetic glances doing little to shield me from the barrage. His silence, though familiar, was no less painful. "So, Emma," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the room like fine crystal, "James tells me you're often at the shop late into the evening. It must be exhausting dealing with retail customers all day. Surely you've considered something more appropriate for a Wheeler." I set down my fork deliberately, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Actually, The dining room door creaked open, interrupting me. The sudden hush that fell over the table was palpable as everyone turned to see who had entered. Victoria's polished smile faltered the moment she recognized the man standing in the doorway. "Marcus," Victoria exclaimed, practically launching herself from her seat. "What an unexpected delight. We weren't expecting you until next week's board meeting." Marcus Chen, a commanding presence in any room, smiled politely, his sharp eyes sweeping across the table before landing on me. "I heard there was a celebration tonight. Thought I'd stop by. Hope I'm not intruding." Patricia, ever eager to align herself with power, quickly motioned to the empty seat beside her. "Not at all, Marcus. Please join us. We were just discussing our exciting hotel project." "Ah, the Green Hotels Initiative," Marcus said, his tone betraying little. "Actually, that's part of why I'm here." His gaze returned to me, and his smile widened. "Emma, could we have a moment?" The silence was deafening. Victoria's carefully curated composure cracked as confusion etched across her face. "You know Emma?" Marcus laughed lightly. "Know her?" "Emma has been one of our most valuable partners for 2 years. Those revolutionary hybrid plants you're using in your hotel project? They're all her creations." Victoria's expression froze mid-smile. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. "That's impossible," Patricia stammered. "She runs a little flower shop." "A flower shop that's been ground zero for some of the most innovative botanical research in recent years," Marcus corrected smoothly. "Emma's hybrids are transformative, beautiful, resilient, and exactly what the Asian market demands. In fact, that's why I'm here tonight." He stepped forward, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "The board approved your terms, Emma. We're ready to proceed with exclusive distribution rights for all 15 of your patented varieties." James finally broke his silence, his voice hoarse. "Emma, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Remember the hybrid varieties I worked on during grad school? The ones you said were incredible? I've been refining them ever since. Now, they're ready for mass production." "Mass production," Victoria echoed faintly, as if the words themselves were foreign. "Indeed," Marcus said, clearly enjoying himself. "Emma's hybrids are uniquely suited to luxury hotels and high-end developments. They're durable, exquisite, and most importantly, exclusive. The licensing fees alone are significant." Patricia's champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering the silence as it hit the table. The deep red liquid spread across the immaculate tablecloth like a blood stain. No one moved to clean it. "But," But you're just a florist, Victoria sputtered. You arrange bouquets and water plants. That shop, I said calmly, has been my research and development lab. Every plant, every arrangement has been part of an experiment. We've collected years of data that's now invaluable. Marcus nodded. Which is why we're not stopping with licensing. We'd like to fund your continued research, Emma. The board is prepared to offer a $50 million annual development budget. Victoria's face drained of color as her world unraveled. James stared at me as though seeing a stranger. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, no words escaping. Finally, Patricia found her voice. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked evenly. From the moment I joined this family, you've made it clear how you see me. As a simple shopkeeper, someone beneath you. What would change if I told you? But James knew, didn't he? Victoria demanded, her tone accusatory as she turned to her son. James shook his head slowly. I didn't. No, I said quietly. You didn't? You saw what you wanted to see, just like the rest of your family. Marcus cleared his throat, reclaiming the room's attention. There's one more thing. Given the importance of Emma's hybrids to the hotel project, we'd like her to oversee the entire supply chain. To that end, we're proposing to acquire controlling interest in Wheeler Corp's botanical division. Victoria's head snapped up, her carefully maintained composure cracking. You want us to report to her? Actually, I interjected, I already do. I finalized the purchase of Green Life Industries, your primary supplier, this morning. Chaos erupted. Patricia shouted about betrayal and corporate hierarchy, while Victoria collapsed back into her chair, clutching her fan as though it could revive her sinking pride. James said nothing, his silence louder than the clamor around us. This is unacceptable. Victoria finally screeched. James, you can't allow this. I turned to my husband, my voice calm but firm. James hasn't been part of my business decisions, just as he's never been part of your constant belittling. He didn't speak up then, and I doubt he will now. Emma, James began weakly, but I cut him off with a look. Marcus touched my shoulder gently. Shall we? He asked, holding the contracts in hand. As we left the dining room, Victoria's thin, strained voice followed us. James, do something. But there was nothing left to do. The walls of their assumptions had crumbled, leaving only the truth they had refused to see. In my spacious office at Chen Agro Corp's Seattle headquarters, Marcus and I finalized the contracts. The city lights sparkled like distant stars, a reminder of how far I had come. You could have told them sooner, Marcus said, watching me sign the final document. Would it have made a difference? I asked. They needed this moment to understand the cost of underestimating someone. And James? I hesitated, the pen hovering over the page. That's a conversation for another day. When I returned home, James was waiting, his silhouette framed by the darkened window. Were you ever going to tell me? He asked, his voice low. Would you have listened? I countered. Or would you have seen only what your family sees? That's not fair, he said, his voice breaking. I loved you for who you are. Did you? I asked quietly. Or did you love the idea of the wife who made you look broad-minded? The florist you could see past. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weeks following that fateful dinner party marked a seismic shift, not only for Wheeler Corp, but for the lives orbiting its influence. News of the revelation spread like wildfire through Seattle's corporate circles, altering alliances and reshaping the power dynamics of an elite that prided itself on appearances. Victoria Wheeler, ever the consummate society strategist, launched a campaign to salvage her reputation. Emma always had promise, she declared at a high-profile charity gala, her voice strategically loud. We simply believed in giving her space to realize it. Though I wasn't present, Sarah, my shop manager and newfound informant, relished relaying such moments. She came by the shop, Sarah reported one morning, barely suppressing her laughter. Asked if she could join our exclusive client list. I looked up from the research report I was reviewing. What did you say? That we're no longer taking retail clients, Sarah grinned. You should have seen her face. Patricia, meanwhile, found her once unquestioned authority at Wheeler Corp eroding rapidly. Board members who had previously dismissed my contributions now sought my guidance on critical decisions. Her attempts to reassert control were met with quiet, decisive corrections. At our first official board meeting, I reviewed her proposal for the hotel gardens. These maintenance projections are outdated, I pointed out, displaying comparative data on the screen. The hybrids require specialized care. Unless you prefer, we use standard varieties, which would undermine the exclusivity we've marketed. Patricia's cheeks flushed as she sat back in her chair, silenced by the weight of evidence. While corporate battles played out in boardrooms, a quieter, more personal reckoning unfolded at home. James and I circled each other warily, the foundations of our marriage unsettled. One evening, I found him in my home office, staring at the framed patents on the wall. "I remember when you created this," he said, his fingers brushing the glass. "I thought they were just pretty flowers." "They were never just flowers, James," I said. "They were my dreams, my future, and I tried to share them with you." He turned, guilt and frustration etched into his features. "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" "Because trust isn't silence," I replied. "Every time your family dismissed me, every time they belittled my work, you said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I was trying to keep the peace." "No," I said softly. "You were taking the easy way out." The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Richard Wheeler, usually the quiet observer, stood at my office door. "May I come in?" he asked. I gestured to the chair opposite me, curious. "I owe you an apology," he began. "For 2 years, I've watched as Victoria and Patricia undermined you, and I said nothing. That was wrong." "Why now?" I asked, wary. His expression softened with regret. "Because you've done what I never had the courage to do. Challenge the Wheeler way of doing things. This company needs leadership, not legacy." He handed me a folder. "I'm stepping down as chairman. I'd like to recommend you as my successor." I blinked, stunned. "That's unexpected." "You've already proven yourself," he said simply. Before I could respond, James burst into the room, his argument with my assistant echoing through the hallway. He froze when he saw his father. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Richard stood, straightening his tie. The right thing for once. After Richard left, I explained the situation to James. He sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "Chairman of Wheeler Corp.," he murmured. "Why are you here, James?" I asked gently. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and vulnerability. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About me. For years, I've lived as the perfect Wheeler son, never questioning anything. And in doing so, I failed you. I want to make it right." "How?" I asked. "I've requested a transfer to the Asian division," he said. "If you'll have me, I want to go with you. Not as the Wheeler heir, but as your partner." Tears pricked my eyes. "You'd leave everything here." "Everything I'm leaving is meaningless without you," he said simply. 2 months later, Victoria hosted another dinner party. I wasn't there, of course. James and I were in Singapore, overseeing the installation of my hybrid gardens in a flagship luxury hotel. Sarah sent me a video from the event. Victoria, tipsy and effusive, regaling guests with tales of her brilliant daughter-in-law. Patricia, meanwhile, had taken a position at a rival firm, unwilling to endure the company's new dynamics. Richard, now serving as an advisor, worked alongside me to steer Wheeler Corp into its next chapter. As our plane descended into Singapore's glittering skyline, James reached for my hand. "Ready for our new adventure?" he asked. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Always." The real triumph wasn't in proving anyone wrong or claiming titles. It was in staying true to myself, nurturing my dreams through the storms of judgment and doubt. My little flower shop had bloomed into a legacy beyond what anyone imagined, except perhaps me, because I had always believed that with care, patience, and resilience, even the smallest seed could transform into something extraordinary.
"Your presence here ruins the atmosphere of the venue. Could you please leave?" he sneered. Though he was technically my brother-in-law's father, his words cut deep. I had traveled a long way to celebrate my sister's wedding, only to find out I was an uninvited guest to the groom's family. "What's the matter? Hurry up and leave. Just having someone like you here ruins the wedding," he spat. Understanding I wasn't welcome, I nodded. "Understood, I'll take my leave." I stepped outside and called my husband. "What's going on? Why are you here?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I was told to leave, so I did," I answered honestly. There was nothing else to say. "What does this mean?" he muttered darkly, turning his gaze toward the groom's family. They stared back, unrepentant. My name is Lisa, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my husband, who is 11 years older than me. The only family I have left are him and my younger sister, Summer, who is 10 years younger. Our father left when I was 10, leaving us in a single-parent household. Summer had just been born, and our mother worked tirelessly to raise us. She juggled jobs from morning till night, and I stepped in to take care of my sister. Despite the hardship, I never complained. We managed until I graduated high school, but years of overwork caught up with my mother, and she passed away. With no extended family to rely on, Summer and I were left to fend for ourselves. What's going to happen to us now, sis? Summer asked, her young face full of fear. Don't worry, I'll manage somehow, I reassured her, though I had no plan. I found a job as a clerk at a small company. The pay wasn't great, but they were willing to hire a high school graduate. It was a small workplace, so I quickly found myself handling a variety of tasks. At first, it was simple clerical work, but my responsibilities grew over time. The boss, however, was kind and supportive. Lisa, would you like to earn a qualification? He asked one day. A qualification? Yes, it's a bit specialized, but we need someone qualified, and you're young, it shouldn't be too hard for you to study, he explained. Would this be outside of working hours? Don't worry, we'll cover the exam fees and textbook costs, please, I'm asking as a favor. The boss's earnest demeanor made it hard to refuse. Besides, earning a qualification could open more doors for me in the future. I thought of Summer, her needs would only grow as she advanced through middle and high school. Understood, I agreed. Don't push yourself too hard, sis, Summer would sometimes say, her voice filled with concern. Don't worry about me, when you graduate high school, you can do whatever you want, I told her. As she entered high school, Summer began considering working right after graduation, but I didn't want her to struggle the way I had, so I convinced her to aim for college. There was one problem, my salary made saving for tuition difficult. I began thinking about changing jobs. When I confided in my boss, I expected disappointment, but he was surprisingly understanding. I completely understand, he said. Actually, I know someone starting a new company. They're looking for someone to handle clerical work. A new company? Yes, and don't worry, it's run by someone very capable. Their business is already doing well, and they're looking for talented employees. The boss assured me the new company's work would be similar to what I was already doing. It sounded ideal, though leaving felt bittersweet. I've been thinking of closing this company soon anyway, my boss admitted. Most of us here are nearing retirement, and it's getting harder to keep up, so don't worry about leaving, you've done more than enough. After 5 years with the company, hearing his kind words brought tears to my eyes. Don't cry, he said gently. If I make a young girl cry, my wife will scold me. It's better when you smile. With his blessing, I joined the new company. Nice to meet you, I'm Mike, my new boss introduced himself. He was 38, with an air of professionalism that was hard to miss. Nice to meet you, I'm Lisa, I replied. We really needed someone with your qualifications. You've been a great help already, Mike said warmly. If you could handle things at your previous company, I'm confident you'll excel here. Thank you very much, I said, feeling both nervous and excited for what lay ahead. I was nervous, but I think I handled it well. Before I knew it, Mike's company had become my new workplace. It was a startup, aggressively expanding, and Mike was at the center of it all. Though it was a new company, it seemed well-backed, with many big projects already on the table. I'm really grateful to have you here, Lisa, Mike said one day. Your office skills are specialized, and it helps that you have such a strong background. I'm glad I invested in your training. His words made me happy, and as time went on, I could see the company growing. Mike appreciated my work, and I no longer worried about my sister's tuition or our daily expenses. You seem so lively these days, my sister commented one morning. Really? Before, you always seemed overwhelmed by work, but now you seem to enjoy it. Maybe it's because of someone, I teased. Mike? She asked, joking. Don't be silly, I laughed. Go get ready for school. 4 years later, I was 27, and my sister was about to graduate high school. She was doing well in school and aiming for her preferred university. Barring any health issues, she was expected to pass. Meanwhile, Mike's company was flourishing, taking on larger projects, and Mike was a brilliant leader, always bringing in new work and building partnerships. The number of employees quickly increased, and before I knew it, I was training new hires. How about a trip sometime? Mike suggested. A trip? But my schedule. I anticipated that. I'll make sure to wrap things up early. Leave it to me. Thank you, but that feels like a luxury. Mike insisted. Let's relax a bit. You've earned it. As part of the founding team, I spent a lot of time with Mike. Naturally, our relationship grew romantic. Despite the 11-year age difference, it didn't matter to me, but there was one thing on my mind. Could we wait to get married? One late night, just the two of us in the office, I decided to share my feelings. Mike, it's not that I don't want to marry you. You're a wonderful man, and I do want to marry you, but I have my sister. She's much younger than me, and until she's independent, I can't leave her. Could we wait until she graduates? I feared it was a selfish request. Mike, already in his mid-30s, was likely thinking seriously about marriage. I wasn't sure if it was too much to ask. Of course, I'll wait until she graduates, Mike said, without hesitation, but in return, let's have dinner with your sister. After all, she'll be family. I was touched by his understanding. His assertiveness was part of what made him such a successful entrepreneur. So, the three of us began spending more time together. As Mike's company stabilized and my sister neared the end of her high school years, we all decided to go on a trip together. It was a wonderful experience, one we wished could last forever. But eventually, the trip ended. My sister went off to college, and Mike and I returned to work. Since the university was nearby, my sister still lived with me, but I knew we'd see less of each other. Around that time, she told me she wanted to get a part-time job. Sure, everyone starts with no experience, I said, though I was still a little worried. I'll be fine, she reassured me. I've been learning about business management from Mike. I'm ready. Her optimism surprised me. She was so much more mature than I had expected. She had always been like that, and her positivity had helped me through tough times. Then, one day, she surprised me even more. Sis, guess what? She said, her eyes sparkling. What is it? I'm getting married after college. I was stunned. Married? Sorry, what? She continued nonchalantly. I'm serious about marrying after graduation. Who's the guy? You don't know him. Or maybe you do. Don't mess with me, I said, half in disbelief. In the summer of her junior year, she announced her plans to get married. I was completely shocked, though she often said surprising things. I hadn't expected her to go this far. The word marriage was sensitive for me, especially considering my thoughts about Mike and me. Remember the business seminar? She asked. I clicked with a guy there. He's planning to start his own company, and he's a good guy, so I thought, why not marry him? Marriage isn't something to take lightly, I said, my voice rising. It's a big commitment, a lifetime decision. I almost expressed my bitterness about our parents, but held it back. My sister gave me a direct look. Don't you want to respond to Mike's feelings? She asked. But I promised to look after you until I graduate. You think I can't manage without you? I've got my life planned, and I've met a good guy. You need to think about your own happiness. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was no longer the little girl I had cared for. Unless you get married first, it's awkward for me, she said. I guess so, I replied softly. Mike and I ended up getting married, and everyone at the company celebrated. Even my first boss came to offer his congratulations. But I still had one more task, meeting my sister's fiancé's family. Brian, her fiancé, seemed like a great guy. He was the eldest son of a small business owner. The business is going to my brother, though, Brian explained. Really? I asked, curious. I always wanted to start my own business, he said, and I liked the idea of working with our family business, so we decided to start our own company together. That's how we met, he added, smiling. Pretty cool, right? We've already incorporated, even as students. Student entrepreneurship isn't that uncommon these days. I was an employee myself, so I couldn't fully follow their discussions, but Brian's family seemed like good people, and I felt he was compatible with my sister. I didn't worry about their future. It was Mike who had introduced Summer to Brian, and he had played a key role in connecting them. I was grateful to him. Our first meeting ended on a warm note, but I still had to meet the rest of Brian's family. It was a natural step, now that we were becoming relatives, but the business owners made me nervous. Strangely, they asked me to come alone. Lisa, yes? I believe you're here to discuss your sister's marriage to Brian. That's correct, I replied, trying to remain composed. That's not why we called you. My father-in-law's voice was sharp. We're here to ask you not to get involved. I was taken aback. What do you mean? You never went to college, you lost your parents, and while Summer seems capable, you certainly don't. Don't expect any help from us. I have no intention of relying on you. I shot back. I've worked hard all my life, supported myself, and planned for my future with Mike. Whether I retire later or not is none of your concern. Words are cheap, my father-in-law sneered. There are many unreliable people out there. We'll invite you to the wedding out of courtesy, but afterward, stay away. The people attending will be far above your station. It would be embarrassing for you to show up. Their laughter echoed with scorn, and I couldn't bear it any longer. When my sister gets married, she'll have a proper family with Brian. Let's hope she doesn't end up like you, they added cruelly. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held my head high as I excused myself. I won't miss my sister's special day, I said firmly, though my voice trembled. As soon as I was outside, I half ran home, tears streaming uncontrollably. No matter how much I washed my face, the pain lingered. Looking at my red, swollen eyes in the mirror, I whispered to myself, I'll never let them see me like this again. The insults didn't just hurt me, they felt like an attack on everyone who had supported me throughout my life. But no matter what, I resolved to attend my sister's wedding. Watching her get married felt like a final act of letting go, a passing of the torch. Time flew by, and soon, her college graduation and wedding day arrived. You'd better come to my wedding, sis, my sister teased. I've planned an amazing day. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied with a smile, hiding my unease about seeing Brian's family again. The venue was extravagant, and the guests exuded wealth and prestige, dressed in formal wear. I felt overwhelmed but kept my composure as I showed my invitation to the usher. He guided me to a private room. As soon as the door opened, mocking voices greeted me. So, you actually came. You really don't understand social cues, do you? Standing before me were Brian's father, mother, and younger brother Dustin, all dressed in high-end suits and designer attire. Why are you here? Dustin sneered. Do you not realize how far beneath us you are? Having someone like you here lowers the venue's prestige. You weren't really meant to show up, his father added. Even though we invited you, we expected you to know better. Get the guards to remove her, Dustin said dismissively. The flood of insults continued, cutting deep. I endured them silently until they crossed the line. What if Summer ends up like you? Dustin spat. She won't, I snapped, my voice shaking. Summer is hardworking and smart. Besides, she and Brian are starting their own business together. Ridiculous. Brian will take over our company, not start some side project, his father scoffed. That's not what they said, I countered. They've already incorporated their own company. Their faces twisted in disbelief. Before they could hurl more accusations, the door opened. Sorry I'm late. Mike's voice filled the room. The family's demeanor shifted instantly. Mike, it's been too long. They greeted him warmly, falling over themselves to show respect. Mike ignored their pleasantries. Have you seen my wife? Your wife, they echoed, shocked. Oh, there she is, Mike said, spotting me in the corner. Why are you standing there? They told me to leave, I said softly. Mike's expression darkened. Why would you tell my wife to leave? She's also the bride's sister. The room fell silent, their faces pale. We didn't know, the father stammered. Explain what happened, Mike demanded. I recounted everything truthfully. So, you insulted my wife and tried to humiliate her? Mike's voice was icy. Insulting her is the same as insulting me. Is that how you treat family? We didn't mean to insult her, they stuttered, visibly sweating. Then what did you mean? Mike's piercing gaze made them shrink. After a long pause, he continued, I do business with your company, but we're not family. Brian is my friend, but that doesn't mean I'll tolerate disrespect toward my wife. Effective immediately, I'll be ending our business relationship. Wait, that will ruin us, Brian's father cried. Please reconsider. I won't. Don't worry, though, I'll work with Brian and Summer's new company instead. They've earned my trust. The family looked stunned, realizing they had lost both their son's loyalty and a critical business partner. Mike turned to me. Let's go, he said, leading me out of the room. The wedding proceeded without further drama. Brian and Summer began their new life together, moving into a new home as they focused on growing their business. Meanwhile, the in-laws faced the consequences of their actions, their company struggling without Mike's support. As for us, life brought a new chapter. I gently patted my belly one evening, excitement and nervousness filling me. When Mike returned home, I greeted him with his favorite stew and a big smile. I have news, I said, placing his hand on my stomach. His eyes lit up. Really? That's amazing. He hugged me gently. With a baby on the way, our family was growing, and though our responsibilities would increase, I knew we could handle it. Together, we would build a happy home filled with love and hope for the future. Out in the mountains, far from anyone, my mother-in-law glared at me. "Take care now," she said coldly before slamming the door of her fancy SUV. The sound echoed in the quiet night as gravel flew from the spinning tires. She drove off quickly, leaving me alone. Under the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of her face. For the first time, I saw her cruel smile and the glint of her eyes, sharp and dangerous like a predator. She looked at me like she'd already won. "Mom, why?" I whispered, my voice shaking, but she just leaned out the window and laughed. It was a chilling sound, full of triumph. "Goodbye, Emily," she sneered. "No one's coming to help you. By tomorrow, you'll just be food for the wolves." Her words cut through me like ice. The roar of her SUV's engine faded as the headlights disappeared into the dark, leaving me frozen in disbelief. I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but it wouldn't turn on. Then I remembered, earlier, she had borrowed my charger. She had planned all this. She tricked me into coming out here under the pretense of showing me a stargazing spot. I felt so foolish. Maybe if I had tried harder to get along with her, or if I had been more serious about handling things with my husband, this wouldn't have happened. But now, standing in the freezing night, I was alone, with only the distant howls of animals echoing in the distance. Fear crept through me. I could feel something watching from the shadows between the trees. The crunch of leaves and heavy footsteps came closer. My heart pounded as I backed away, unsure which direction was safe. Behind me, the sound of footsteps grew louder. "I'm Emily Matthews, 26 years old, married to John for 2 years. John has always been kind and supportive. When I was overwhelmed with work or unwell, he would cook for me or help me feel better. Marrying him was the best decision of my life. I come from a well-off family, but I worked hard to build a life of my own. I didn't want to rely on my parents' money, so I kept my family's wealth a secret from John. I wanted to live by my own efforts. John and I both worked in the bridal industry, and I loved my job. But then John decided to quit his stable job to start his own business. Though worried, I supported him because I believed in his determination. Then, I found out the truth. John had been in a relationship with another woman from his college days. Not only that, but he had racked up $50,000 in debt from extravagant trips with her. I had no idea and was devastated when I learned about it. To my horror, he started his business with that same woman as his partner. He claimed his family was supporting him financially. His mother, Susan, adored him and justified everything he did. She treated me as if I was trying to steal her son. Meanwhile, John's sister, Megan, lived off him completely. She refused to work, saying she didn't want to deal with things like speaking formally to her boss. She seemed entitled and difficult, which made dealing with her exhausting. For a while, I endured it all because I loved John, but Susan and Megan started visiting our home often, rummaging through my belongings without permission. They used my expensive, cherished items as props for their social media, treating them carelessly. One day, Susan took my favorite brown purse without asking and broke it. I hoped she'd apologize, but instead, she smirked and said, "It was bought with John's money, so I don't owe you anything." I felt crushed. Even though I earned a good income, I couldn't keep replacing my things endlessly. I reminded Susan that the bag she broke was something I bought before I got married. It was my first big purchase, something I had dreamed of owning. "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "Girls like you don't have money for things like that. Don't try to fool me." She had already labeled me as a gold digger, accusing me of spending John's money on luxuries. It was impossible to talk to her. She didn't even try to understand. She only saw me as an enemy. When I turned to John for support, he barely listened. "Just hold on a little longer. Mom's going through a rough time," he said. It hurt so much to feel ignored, even by him. I had always thought of myself as strong and independent, but being so alone was overwhelming. Around that time, John's business started to fail. He couldn't keep up with Susan and Megan's expensive lifestyles anymore. He finally told them he couldn't support them financially. They panicked, but instead of considering getting jobs, they came up with another plan. "Take some of Emily's money and give it to us. Family comes first," Susan declared. I explained, again, that I split living expenses with John and used my own income, but they didn't believe me. Their frustration grew, and for a while, they visited less often. I thought maybe they were starting to accept reality. I was wrong. They were plotting something far worse. When Susan found out about my wealthy family, her resentment deepened. She became obsessed, convinced that if I disappeared, They could control John's money and even inherit a fortune from me. She imagined millions, even though I hadn't written a will, and my family, not them, would inherit everything. Her twisted thinking led her to a horrifying plan. Susan knew I loved photography, especially taking pictures of the night sky. She researched remote locations with little human activity and found a spot where she thought no one would find me. "Out here, no one will ever find you. It's bear season, this'll look like an accident," she told Megan. Megan agreed without hesitation. "I'll drive for you, Mom, we're doing this for John," she said, pretending it was for his sake, though it was really all for their own benefit. On the day of the plan, Susan called me with an unusually friendly tone. "Emily, I know you love stargazing. There's a spot nearby with the most beautiful stars. Want to go?" she asked. Feeling hesitant but hopeful, I agreed. They seemed so kind that day, chatting about beauty and fashion, even complimenting my hair. "I've always wanted a daughter like you," Susan said warmly. It felt strange, but I wanted to believe they were finally accepting me. When we reached the spot, they encouraged me to step out and take pictures. "We'll grab some things from the car and join you," they said. I stepped out, looking up at the breathtaking stars, but then I heard the car door slam. I turned to see them locking the doors and starting the engine. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears, honey," Susan shouted as they sped off, leaving me alone in the cold, dark mountains. Fear gripped me as I realized I had been abandoned, but I wasn't entirely unprepared. I had a backup plan. Meanwhile, Susan and Megan were celebrating. "It's all taken care of," Susan said, grinning. They went out for a fancy dinner, thinking their troubles were over. But when they returned home, their celebration ended in shock. Police cars were waiting in the driveway. Standing beside them was me, calm and unharmed, alongside my father and several officers. "What? How are you here?" Susan stammered, frozen in disbelief. Megan tried to sneak away, but the police stopped her. I had been rescued thanks to my father's safety measures. Since I was young, he had insisted on tracking my location through GPS and having a backup emergency system. When I realized something was wrong, I activated it. My father, who had access to a private jet, reached me quickly. The clear stargazing spot made it easy for them to land and rescue me. I had also recorded the entire car ride, as my father had advised me to always record suspicious situations. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears," Susan's voice rang out clearly from my phone. The evidence was undeniable. Susan and Megan were arrested on the spot for attempted murder and fraud. Susan fainted, and Megan broke down in hysterics, blaming her mother. John, meanwhile, was exposed for being with his mistress all along. He testified against his family, but it was just another betrayal in a series of heartbreaks. The story became a media sensation. Headlines mocked Susan as the mother-in-law who wanted millions. Details about how Susan and Megan used my belongings for social media clout went viral. John, who had once prided himself on his reputation, now couldn't even leave the house without facing shame. As for Susan and Megan, their disgrace didn't end with their arrests. Someone leaked their phone numbers, and they were bombarded with calls from angry strangers. The next day, all of Susan and Megan's bank accounts were frozen, and everything they owned was seized. Without John's income, they couldn't afford anything. To make matters worse, news about John's mistress spread all over the internet, destroying his reputation completely. The man who had betrayed me had now lost everything, including his dignity. I found out John had been with his mistress since the beginning of our marriage. Remembering the kind things he once did for me now felt like a cruel joke. Why had he married me if he never truly loved me? My heart ached with pain and betrayal, but I resolved to move on. Susan and Megan were evicted from their luxurious apartment and moved into public housing. It didn't take long before their new location was leaked online. Susan became mentally unstable, constantly muttering about how her life was over. Megan, abandoned by her own family, tried to work part-time jobs, but struggled due to a lack of skills and work ethic. Megan even messaged me, asking for help getting a job like mine. "Working at weddings and wearing nice clothes sounds fun," she said. I ignored her. The bridal industry wasn't something she could just jump into, and their downfall wasn't my responsibility. Meanwhile, Susan moved into a rundown apartment surrounded by graffiti and decay. As for me, I left the house I'd once shared with John, along with all my possessions, and returned to my parents' home. It felt safer, even though I still carried emotional scars. One day, John unexpectedly called me. Seeing his name on the screen made my stomach churn. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I've cut ties with my mom. Please, let's try again," he said, but his promises felt hollow. How could I trust him again after everything? Maybe your mistress needs your protection more than I do, I replied coldly, ending the call. Susan wasn't done yet. Desperate and bitter, she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. When the detective found nothing, Susan latched onto a small detail, my PTSD. She thought she could use it against me. One evening, as I walked alone, Susan suddenly appeared on the sidewalk. Her clothes were shabby, but her face wore a twisted grin. "Guess the bears didn't get you," she sneered. Her words sent a wave of fear through me as memories of that night in the mountains flooded back. She even threatened to spread a video of me unless I paid her. Though her threat made no sense, her presence terrified me. She climbed into a car and drove away, leaving me shaken. I called my father, who was furious. Using his resources, he discovered evidence of tax evasion and fraud in John's business. When confronted, John had no choice but to admit his guilt. His mistress, Lena, was shocked to learn she was tied to his shady dealings. Their lies and schemes unraveled, leaving them exposed and humiliated. John's accounts were frozen, and he lost everything. Even his mother, Susan, abandoned him, saying, "You're no son of mine." Both of them were left with nothing, their selfishness leading to their complete downfall. Despite everything, I focused on healing and finding a new purpose. My experience inspired me to help others escape toxic families and rebuild their lives. With my parents' support, I opened a refuge center in the family retreat where I'd once been rescued. It became a safe haven for those who needed a fresh start. I even earned a counseling qualification to guide others through their pain. Over time, the refuge grew, welcoming people who needed a safe place to heal. One day, a woman arrived, escaping her abusive family. I reassured her, "You've done so well to get out. I'm glad I left when I did, too." Her tears turned to a soft smile as I reminded her it was okay to acknowledge the pain and set boundaries. With time, I began to smile again, finding joy in helping others rebuild their lives. Susan, Megan, and John continued to struggle, but I felt no pity. They were simply reaping the consequences of their own actions. Meanwhile, the refuge became a place of hope, ensuring no one else would have to face the kind of pain I once endured.
I never planned to keep my success a secret. Life just worked out that way. Growing up in Singapore, my parents taught me the value of hard work and education. "Emily, knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you," my father would say as he drove his taxi late into the night to fund my studies. My mother worked 2 jobs, and together they made sure I had everything I needed to excel. Their sacrifice paid off. I graduated top of my class in finance and landed a position at one of Asia's largest banks. By 28, I was the youngest division head in the bank's history, managing over $50 billion in corporate loans. But few knew this side of me. I met James at my friend's small cafe where I loved to work on weekends, helping out just to stay grounded. He walked in one rainy morning, ordered a latte, and smiled when I drew a little heart in the foam. "This is the best coffee I've had in months," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The secret is making it with care," I replied, wiping down the counter. He came back every weekend after that. We talked about everything: his work as an architect, his dreams of designing sustainable buildings, his close relationship with his family. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, enjoying how he saw me for who I was, not what I owned. When he finally asked me out, I said yes without hesitation. Our first date was at a humble hawker center, sharing plates of char kway teow and laughing about nothing in particular. I fell in love with his kindness, his integrity, and how he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status. "My family's a bit traditional," he warned me before our first dinner with them. "They can be judgmental about status and career." "Don't worry," I assured him, "I can handle it." I wasn't prepared for Richard Chen, James's father. A self-made real estate tycoon, he dominated every room he entered. His wife, Helen, was equally intimidating in her designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair. James's sister, Victoria, took after their mother, down to her dismissive glance when I mentioned working at a cafe. "A cafe?" Richard's voice boomed across the dinner table. "James, I thought you said she went to university." "She did, Dad. Emily has a degree in—" Clearly not putting it to good use, Richard interrupted. "In this family, we believe in ambition. Excellence. Not serving coffee." I saw James's face redden, but he stayed silent. Helen touched her pearl necklace, a habit I learned meant she was about to deliver a carefully crafted insult. "Dear, perhaps you could help Emily find a more Suitable position. The cleaning company we use is always hiring. Victoria snickered. At least she have health insurance. I maintained my composure, years of high-stakes negotiations serving me well. I enjoy my current work, but thank you for your concern. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle digs and patronizing advice. James apologized profusely on the drive home. They'll come around, he promised. They just need time to know you. But they did. Over the next year, as James and I grew closer, his family's disdain only intensified. Every family gathering became an exercise in endurance. Richard never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of my humble station. Helen orchestrated seating arrangements to keep me far from important guests. Victoria openly suggested James find someone more appropriate. When James proposed, their reaction was predictable. A cafe worker, Richard exploded. Have you lost your mind? Dad, I love her. James stood firm. Love won't maintain our family standing. Richard shot back. If you marry her, don't expect any support from me. But James chose me. We had a small, beautiful wedding, without his family present. Months passed. I continued my weekend cafe shifts, finding peace in the simple work while managing billion-dollar deals during the week. James respected my choice to keep my career private, understanding my need to be loved for myself, not my position. Then came the annual Chen family reunion. We have to go, James insisted. They're still family. I agreed, hoping time had softened their hearts. I was wrong. The reunion was held at Richard's mansion, a sprawling estate that screamed old money. The moment we arrived, I felt the familiar weight of judgmental stares. Oh, the cafe girl still hasn't found a real job. Victoria's voice carried across the garden. How persistent. Richard gathered everyone for his annual family address, champagne flowing freely as he boasted about the family's achievements. Then he spotted us. Ah, James, come, tell everyone about your new project. His eyes slid past me. And your wife can serve drinks. It's what she's good at, yes. Laughter rippled through the crowd. James opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, a commotion erupted near the house. Richard's secretary came running out, face pale. Mr. Chen. Urgent call from the bank. Not now, Richard waved her off. We're celebrating. Sir, it's about the emergency loans. They're denied. Richard's smile faltered. Impossible. I spoke with the division head yesterday. No, sir. The new CEO is reviewing all major loans personally. They're requesting a meeting tomorrow. I felt my phone vibrate, my own secretary calling. I knew what this was about. Richard's company had been flagged for suspicious accounting, and as CEO of the corporate banking division, I had ordered a complete audit. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Excuse me, I said quietly, stepping away from the crowd to take my call. Ma'am, my secretary whispered, Chen Development's financials are worse than we thought. The audit shows systematic misrepresentation of assets. Send me the files, I replied. I'll review them tonight. When I returned, Richard was in full crisis mode. His face had lost its usual smugness, replaced by barely concealed panic. He was barking orders into his phone while Helen hovered nearby, wringing her perfectly manicured hands. Victoria sidled up to me, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Looks like Daddy's company is having issues. Not that you understand business matters. More champagne? I smiled politely. No, thank you. But I do have a question. How's your position at your father's company? She preened. I'm Executive Vice President of Operations. Interesting. And what exactly do you do? Her smile faltered. I oversee things. Important things. Like the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Victoria's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Several heads turned our way. I don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. The ones hiding your father's debt? Or perhaps the inflated property valuations? Before she could respond, Richard's voice boomed across the garden. Everyone, party's over. Family emergency. As guests began to leave, Richard pulled James aside. Son, I need your help. The bank, they're being unreasonable. Your architecture firm has good relationships with other banks, yes. James looked uncomfortable. Dad, we're just a small firm. We don't handle those kinds of loans. Useless, Richard exploded. Just like your choice in wife. If I lose this company, it's on your head for bringing bad luck into this family. That was enough. I stepped forward, my phone in hand. Mr. Chen, I believe we have a meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. He barely glanced at me. This doesn't concern you, coffee girl. Actually, it does. I opened my banking app, displaying my executive profile. I'm the CEO you'll be meeting. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and horror. Helen's pearl necklace clattered to the ground. Victoria looked like she might faint. That's impossible, Richard stammered. Emily Chen, CEO of Corporate Banking Division, Singapore United Bank, I stated calmly. Your loan applications crossed my desk last week. The irregularities were concerning. James stared at me, mouth agape. Emily? All this time. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I own. I explained softly. You gave me that gift. Your family, not so much. Richard suddenly straightened, his businessman instincts kicking in. Well, this is wonderful news. We're all family here. Surely we can work something out. Family? I echoed. Like when you called me a gold digger at our wedding reception. Or when you told your business associates that James married beneath his station. Helen stepped forward, arms outstretched. Darling, we were just protecting our son. Surely you understand. I understand perfectly. You judged me, humiliated me, and treated me like dirt because you thought I was beneath you. Now you want my help? Victoria attempted damage control. Emily, sweetie, we were just teasing. It was all in good fun. I turned to James. Did you know about your sister's role in the company? He shook his head. She said she was handling operations. She's been helping your father hide debt and inflate assets. The audit shows years of financial manipulation. Richard's face turned purple. Now see here, you can't just. I can and I will, I interrupted. Tomorrow's meeting isn't about loans, it's about fraud investigation. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't dare, we're family. Family? I laughed softly. Let me share some wisdom from my father, the taxi driver you mocked at my wedding. He taught me that true family supports you, believes in you, and loves you regardless of your status. You've done none of those things. I took James's hand. The authorities will be contacting you tomorrow. I suggest you get your lawyers ready. As we turned to leave, Helen called out desperately. Wait, what about Victoria? She was just following orders. I paused at the door. Actions have consequences, Helen. Victoria chose to participate in fraud. She'll face the same investigation as everyone else. The drive home was silent. Finally, James spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have treated me differently if you knew? He thought for a moment. No, I fell in love with you, not your job. That's why I fell in love with you too. I squeezed his hand. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I just needed to know our love was real. What happens now? I sighed. Your father's company will be investigated. With the evidence we have, there will likely be criminal charges. Victoria too, if she's implicated. And us? That depends. Can you handle being married to a woman who makes more than your entire family combined? James laughed, the tension breaking. I think I'll manage, but no more secrets. No more secrets, I promised. The next morning, the Chen family empire began to crumble. Richard arrived at my office precisely at 9 a.m., flanked by his lawyers. Gone was the arrogant tycoon. In his place sat a man who finally realized he wasn't the most powerful person in the room. The audit revealed systematic fraud spanning 5 years, I stated, sliding the report across my desk. Falsified valuations, hidden debts, shell companies. It's all here. We can explain, his lawyer began. No need. The evidence has been forwarded to the authorities. Richard leaned forward. Emily, please, think about what this will do to the family name. Like you thought about my reputation when you told everyone I was a gold digger? Before he could respond, my secretary interrupted. Ma'am, the police are here. What followed was a media circus. Chen Development CEO arrested for fraud splashed across headlines. Victoria was taken into custody next, her designer handbag clutched to her chest as officers led her away. Helen had a very public breakdown at the country club. James stood by me through it all, though I knew it pained him to see his family fall apart. They did this to themselves, he said one evening as we watched the news coverage. You just exposed the truth. Weeks turned into months. The investigation uncovered more than even I had suspected. Richard had been running a complex scheme, using inflated property valuations to secure loans, then channeling the money through shell companies. Victoria had helped coordinate the fraud, her executive position nothing more than a front. The trial was swift. Richard and Victoria were both sentenced to prison. 8 years for him, 5 for her. Helen was spared criminal charges but lost everything in the asset forfeitures. One day, as autumn painted Singapore's gardens in golden hues, Helen appeared at my office. "I know I have no right to be here," she began, her designer clothes replaced by simple cotton. "But I need to say something." I gestured for her to continue. "I was wrong about you. So terribly wrong." Tears filled her eyes. "We judged you because we thought wealth and status were everything. Now I'm alone, living in a small apartment, working as a sales clerk, and I finally understand." "Understand what?" "That character matters more than cash. You were kind to us even when we were cruel. You could have destroyed us completely, but you let the law take its course. That's real class." I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse for the first time. "What do you want, Helen?" "A chance. Not to be close. I know I don't deserve that. But to apologize to you and James. To try to be better." 6 months later, we hosted a small dinner party. Helen came bringing homemade dumplings, a skill she'd learned in her new life. She was different now, humbler, more genuine. James was healing too, visiting his father and sister in prison, working through years of family dysfunction. As for me, I kept my weekend shifts at the cafe. Not because I needed to hide anymore, but because I loved the simplicity of making someone's day better with a perfect cup of coffee. One morning, a young woman came in, looking defeated. "Rough day?" I asked, drawing a heart in her latte foam. "My boyfriend's parents think I'm not good enough," she sighed. "Wrong background, wrong job." I smiled, remembering where my own journey began. "Let me tell you a story about family, pride, and what really matters in the end. Life has a way of teaching us its most important lessons. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters." Richard and Victoria learned this in prison. Helen learned it through humility. And I learned that being true to yourself is worth more than all the wealth in the world. James and I are expecting our first child now. We've decided to name her Grace, a reminder that sometimes the hardest situations deserve a measure of mercy. Helen is excited to be a grandmother, and even Richard, through his prison letters, seems to be reflecting on what kind of legacy he really wants to leave. The cafe still stands, a humble reminder of where our story began. Sometimes customers recognize me, the banking CEO who serves coffee on weekends. They often ask why I still do it. My answer is simple. Every cup of coffee is a chance to make someone's day better, and at the end of our lives, isn't that what matters most? They usually smile, understanding or not. But I know my truth. Success isn't about power or revenge or even proving others wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, showing kindness even when it's not deserved, and remembering that everyone, even those who hurt us, deserves a chance at redemption. As I write this, I'm sitting in the cafe, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of hope. James will join me soon, as he does every weekend. Helen might stop by with her dumplings. Life isn't perfect, but it's real and rich with lessons learned. And sometimes, when I'm making coffee or reviewing billion-dollar deals, I think about my father's words. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. He was right, but he missed something important: integrity, compassion, and the courage to be yourself. Those are things nobody can take either.
The inheritance of $10 million from our parents would soon be decided, and I knew my sister Megan's intentions all too well. She made it clear she believed our parents adored her more and would have wanted her to inherit everything. "You know it's obvious," she said with a smirk. "Why would they leave anything to someone as plain as you?" Megan had hardly contributed during our parents' funeral. While I managed the overwhelming arrangements, she spent her time discussing the inheritance, as though she couldn't wait for the formalities to end. She eventually made her stance clear. "I'll take it all. Fine by me if you never contact me again," she said mockingly. Who would want to? I thought. She didn't realize she was the one being cut off, not me. Without a word, I turned my back on her laughter, feeling only a hollow resignation. I had lost my sister as surely as I'd lost our parents, yet no sadness came. "I am Hillary," a 35-year-old office worker. Both of our parents were entrepreneurs who built successful businesses, allowing my sister and me to graduate from private schools and universities. After finishing my studies, I joined a company where I've worked steadily ever since. Megan, on the other hand, never sought stability. She drifted through life, taking occasional part-time jobs without any concrete plans for her future. Despite her lack of direction, our parents indulged her. They provided for her expenses and adventures, while urging me to be prudent and self-sufficient. The difference in treatment was painfully clear. Megan's life of ease was granted because of her extraordinary beauty. She had inherited our mother's large, expressive eyes and double eyelids, our father's sharp nose, and our grandmother's elegant figure. Everywhere she went, she turned heads, exuding charm and confidence. I, however, was not so fortunate. I had my mother's low nose, my father's small eyes, and my grandfather's stocky build. From the moment Megan was born, 6 years after me, she became the family's darling, effortlessly overshadowing me. As a child, I adored her, and she would follow me around, calling me Hillary. But by the time she reached elementary school, her beauty garnered attention that highlighted my own insecurities. Scouts would arrive to recruit her for modeling opportunities, but I was often met with polite dismissal. As I entered adolescence, Megan became aware of her advantages. By high school, she used them to torment me openly. She'd take my belongings, sometimes claiming them as her own, and stage melodramatic scenes to paint herself as the victim. Our parents always sided with her. "Hillary, you're the older sister," they'd chide. "Be patient with Megan, she's just teasing you." No amount of protest changed their perception. By the time I graduated university, I had had enough. I moved out and avoided home, taking holiday jobs to keep from returning. 4 years, I distanced myself from the family, rejecting their pleas to come back. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Our parents died in a sudden car accident, forcing Megan and me to confront each other after years of separation. At the funeral, she cried incessantly while I handled the arrangements, grieving quietly, but when the subject turned to inheritance, Megan's tears dried up, replaced by cold calculation. Our parents' estate, worth $10 million, was now the focus. It was no surprise when Megan began asserting her entitlement, but her attitude only confirmed one thing: I had no reason to stay tethered to her anymore. "I'm taking it all," Megan sneered. "After all, you're unattractive, and our parents loved me more. They'd want me to have everything." "Oh, do you need some money for plastic surgery?" "I don't want it," I replied calmly. Her surprise was evident, but I meant every word. The idea of inheriting was meaningless to me, especially after the chaos surrounding our parents' sudden deaths. There had been no time to grieve, as I was overwhelmed by the demands of relatives, subordinates, and business partners at the funeral. The whispered remarks comparing us, "Are they even sisters? They don't look alike at all," paired with Megan's smug expressions only deepened my exhaustion. "I don't want the inheritance," I repeated. "You can have all $10 million, but there's one condition." Megan tensed, narrowing her eyes. "What condition?" "I won't take a cent, but in exchange, I'm severing all ties with you. From this moment on, we're no longer family. No contact, no help, ever." At first, she seemed stunned, but as the terms sank in, a smirk spread across her face. $10 million and cutting you off? Perfect. Why would I ever need someone as ugly as you? Just don't come crying to me later. Ignoring her mocking laughter, I left our family home for good. I had lost my parents and now my sister, but the relief of cutting ties outweighed any lingering sadness. 3 months passed peacefully until Megan began bombarding me with calls. I ignored them at first, but since I needed my phone for work, I reluctantly answered. "Hillary, I need a favor," she demanded. "I don't have a sister," I said coldly. "Stop contacting me." As I tried to hang up, she pressed on, her tone self-pitying but unapologetic. "I tried to spend Dad's money, but a friend at City Hall said I need to consult about inheritance taxes. Isn't it just mine? Do I really need to pay taxes for money my own father left me? I don't know any lawyers, so can you handle it?" Her entitlement gave me a headache, but I decided to clarify the situation to shut her down. "For the record, there's no inheritance tax in this case since the amount is under $1, $4 million, but you only have access because I renounced my claim. I already informed a lawyer, so I have no rights to Dad's estate. Any issues are your problem now." "Wait, that's great," she began. "Don't thank me," I interrupted, "and don't contact me again." Megan ended the call in a huff. It was clear she hadn't done her homework. Inheritance isn't as simple as taking the money and running. Assets go through probate, and debts are settled before distribution. Megan's ignorance of these processes would soon catch up with her. Weeks later, Megan consulted a lawyer and learned the harsh truth. The $10 million was the total value of our parents' assets, not liquid cash. Most of it was tied to the businesses they had started, and Megan, who had no involvement, wasn't entitled to much. Worse, she discovered she was responsible for business debts as a co-signer on some loans. By the time debts were deducted, her inheritance amounted to just $1 million. Her calls resumed, this time frantic and tearful. "Hillary, I'm only getting $1 million. This doesn't make any sense." "That's still a lot of money," I said, exasperated, like winning the lottery. "Didn't I tell you not to contact me again?" But Megan, who had expected millions, wouldn't stop. Her troubles only grew when rumors spread that she had inherited $10 million. Relatives, supposed friends, and even strangers hounded her for money. Stalkers and extortionists appeared, drawn by the false rumor. "Hillary, help me," she begged in desperation. "Where are you now?" But I had long since left her behind. The silence in my life was precious, and I had no intention of losing it again. Megan's frantic screams filled my voicemail. "I'm suffering so much," she cried, her desperation palpable. Judging by her messages, she had visited my old apartment, unaware that I had terminated the lease and moved elsewhere. With no way to reach me, she resorted to relentless calls and voicemails. Eventually, she even went to the police. However, having boasted about inheriting $10 million and flaunting her newfound wealth by gifting designer bags, her plight was seen as self-inflicted. Rumors of her inheritance had spread like wildfire, and the authorities, overwhelmed by her situation, advised her to move. Then, one day, her voicemails took on a cheery tone. "Hillary, I've met the man of my dreams, Peter. He doesn't know about the inheritance and truly loves me." I suspected a scam immediately. Sure enough, Peter, a man Megan met by chance, had proposed they move in together after learning about her savings. He convinced her that banks were risky and suggested she keep her money in a home safe instead. Megan, ignoring all advice, closed her account, converted her inheritance into cash, and stored it in the safe. The next day, the safe was empty, and Peter was gone. Her voicemails quickly turned chaotic again. "I was deceived. Peter was only after the money. My life is the worst. Hillary, why won't you help me?" Her messages grew angrier and more desperate. "It's because of your attitude that you're ugly," she screamed in one. Instead of learning from her mistakes, Megan continued blaming everyone but herself. As her funds dwindled, Megan had to leave her luxury apartment and move back into our old family home. There, she faced a new nightmare. Self-proclaimed relatives and so-called friends showed up daily, claiming she should share the house or let them live with her. Mentally exhausted and terrified, Megan left me voicemails twice a day, begging for help. Finally, I made up my mind to respond. "Hello," I said flatly, answering her call for the first time. Megan gasped, clearly shocked to hear my voice. "Hillary, help me, I hate this life. I want to live with you. Please, where should I go?" "No," I said firmly. "Do you remember our agreement? I gave up the inheritance on the condition that you'd never contact me again. How many times have you broken that promise?" "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Please come get me. I can't stand this anymore. Please help me." Megan's pleas grew more frantic, but I didn't budge. "No, the only reason I picked up was to tell you this is the last time. I'm changing my number. You won't be able to reach me again. Stop wasting your time and your money on call charges." "Hillary, please." I interrupted her. "You always lied to me and put me down, but now you've destroyed yourself. I'm finally free of you, and I'm happy. You should try to find a way to fix your life, too." Her screams echoed over the phone as I hung up for the last time. She may have been begging for forgiveness, but it no longer concerned me. I had fulfilled my end of the deal, renounced the inheritance, and kept my distance. Megan's ruin was her own doing. I turned off my phone, headed to a mobile shop, and changed my number. Since then, my life has flourished. I commute to work from a new, peaceful home, focus on improving my skills, and have rapidly advanced in my career. "You've changed," my boss remarked one day. "You're no longer weighed down by comparisons." At lunch, my colleagues noted, "You used to say things like, 'I'm just this' or 'I'm just that,' but not anymore. You seem brighter and more confident." For the first time, I've learned to value myself without comparing myself to others. I no longer have a family, But I found contentment and happiness on my own terms. I never imagined my wedding day would be the beginning of my greatest nightmare. The moment I walked down the aisle, glowing in my carefully chosen white gown, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as I soon learned, are only stories. Reality is far more cruel. My husband, Ethan, had always been charming. His smile could light up a room, and his words carried a warmth that made you feel like you were the center of the universe. That's what drew me to him in the first place. But standing there at the altar, I couldn't shake the icy glances from his mother, Vivian, and his older sister, Lila. They sat in the front row, whispering to each other as if sharing some inside joke. My stomach twisted. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. The reception was lavish, Vivian's doing, of course. She loved to flaunt her wealth and influence. As I greeted the guests, I noticed how Vivian's friends looked me up and down, their smiles polite but their eyes sharp, assessing. "She's lovely," one woman said to Vivian, loud enough for me to hear, "but she's simple, isn't she?" Vivian's response was a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. Yes, well, not everyone can be extraordinary. I clenched my fists, determined to ignore the sting. This was my wedding day. I refused to let her ruin it. But the real blow came later that night during the first dance. Ethan's family had gathered around, clapping and cheering, but their smiles were laced with mockery. As Ethan twirled me under the lights, I overheard Lila whisper to a cousin, "She doesn't belong here. She's out of her depth." The words pierced me like a knife. My dream day was unraveling. When Ethan and I finally escaped to our hotel suite, I confronted him. "Your family, they don't like me, do they?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Don't let them get to you, Kate. They're just protective." Protective? They were mocking me, Ethan. Right there in front of everyone. He kissed my forehead, his tone dismissive. "You're overthinking it. Let's just enjoy tonight." But I couldn't enjoy it. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they would only grow in the weeks to come. Married life with Ethan was a mix of bliss and bitterness. He was sweet when we were alone, but when his family was around, he transformed into someone else entirely. Vivian's subtle jabs became a daily occurrence, always wrapped in a guise of concern. "Kate, dear," she said one evening during a family dinner, "have you thought about taking etiquette classes? It's just, well, our circles can be quite demanding, and I wouldn't want you to feel out of place." Lila smirked over her glass of wine. "Oh, Mother, don't overwhelm her. She's doing her best, after all." I looked to Ethan for support, but he only gave me a strained smile, his eyes darting away. The breaking point came during a charity gala. Vivian had insisted I attend, even though I felt like a fish out of water among the glittering gowns and polished smiles. As I stood awkwardly by the bar, I overheard Vivian speaking to a group of donors. "She's sweet," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but honestly, I expected Ethan to choose someone more refined." Laughter erupted from the group, and my face burned with humiliation. When I confronted Ethan that night, his response was infuriating. "They don't mean anything by it," he said, brushing off my tears. "You're taking it too personally." Despite everything, I tried to fit in. I took Vivian's advice, attending etiquette classes and investing in designer clothes, hoping to earn their approval. But nothing was ever enough. Every effort I made was met with more criticism. One evening, as I sat alone in our apartment, staring at a photo from our honeymoon, something inside me snapped. Why was I bending over backward for people who clearly despised me? Why wasn't Ethan standing up for me? I realized then that I couldn't keep living like this. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. From that moment of realization, my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to let Vivian, Lila, or anyone else in Ethan's family dictate how I lived my life, or how I felt about myself. If they wanted me to fail, I would give them the fight of their lives. But I quickly learned that standing up to them would come with devastating consequences. My first act of defiance was at a family brunch Vivian hosted at her sprawling estate. The theme was old Hollywood glamour, and I arrived dressed to the nines in a sleek black gown with vintage pearls, channeling Audrey Hepburn. When I walked through the door, all heads turned, and for a moment, I thought I'd won a small victory. Vivian's smile was tight. "Oh, Kate, you made it. I wasn't sure you'd understand the theme." I returned her smile, equally icy. "I never miss an opportunity to shine." Lila snorted into her mimosa, but I ignored her. As the brunch progressed, I held my ground, participating in conversations with poise and confidence. I could see their discomfort, Vivian's forced laughter, Lila's exaggerated eye rolls, but I felt empowered for the first time. Until, of course, they retaliated. After the meal, Vivian pulled me aside, her tone sweet but her words venomous. "I know you're trying, dear, but perhaps it's best to let the more seasoned women handle the social dynamics. You wouldn't want to embarrass yourself, or Ethan." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. "Thank you for the advice, Vivian," I said, my voice steady. "But I think I'll manage just fine." The conflict with Vivian and Lila wasn't just between us, it seeped into my marriage. Ethan hated confrontation, and instead of supporting me, he retreated into silence. One night, after another heated dinner with his family, I confronted him. "Why won't you say anything to them?" I demanded, pacing our living room. "They humiliate me, Ethan. In front of you, in front of everyone, and you just sit there." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "What do you want me to do, Kate? They're my family, and what am I?" I shot back, my voice cracking. "Am I not your family too?" His silence was deafening. It became clear that I was on my own. Things escalated at Ethan's company gala, an event I had been dreading but couldn't avoid. Vivian and Lila were, of course, in attendance, along with the elite of the business world. I had meticulously prepared, wearing an elegant emerald gown and practicing conversation starters to hold my own. For most of the evening, I managed to avoid them. But as I stood by the buffet, chatting with one of Ethan's colleagues, I heard a familiar voice. "She's charming, isn't she?" Vivian's tone was syrupy sweet, but her words were daggers. "It's just a shame she doesn't quite understand our world." "Poor thing, she's trying so hard," Lila chimed in, her laughter sharp. "It's like watching a child play dress-up." My heart sank as I realized they were talking about me. Worse, the colleague I was speaking to excused himself awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle Vivian and Lila were making. I couldn't take it anymore. Turning on my heel, I marched straight to their table. "Is there something you'd like to say to me directly?" I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. The room fell silent. Vivian looked up at me with feigned surprise. "Kate, dear, what are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my hands clenched. "You've been undermining me since the day I married Ethan." "I'm done pretending it doesn't bother me," Lila smirked. "Oh, sweetie, don't take things so personally. It's all in good fun." "Fun?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Tearing someone down for your own amusement is fun to you?" Before they could respond, I turned to Ethan, who had been standing frozen by the bar. "And you," I said, my voice breaking, "are you really going to just stand there and let this happen?" He looked at me helplessly, his silence cutting deeper than any insult Vivian or Lila could throw. Humiliated and furious, I left the gala, ignoring Ethan's weak protests as I stormed out. The weeks that followed were a blur of arguments and cold shoulders. Ethan tried to apologize, but his words felt hollow. The rift between us widened with each passing day. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, a headline caught my eye: "Family feud at high society gala, daughter-in-law causes scene." My heart sank as I read the article, complete with quotes from anonymous attendees describing me as overly emotional and out of place. It didn't take a genius to figure out who had leaked the story. Furious, I confronted Ethan. "Your family has crossed a line," I said, shoving the article in his face. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" He looked at the article and sighed. "Kate, you shouldn't have confronted them like that. You know how they are." I stared at him, incredulous. "You're blaming me?" "They humiliated me, Ethan, publicly, and now they're spreading lies about me to the media." "I'll talk to them," he said weakly, but I knew he wouldn't. For the first time, I started to wonder if I had made a mistake marrying him. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, an unexpected lifeline appeared in the form of Ethan's younger brother, Adam. Unlike the rest of the family, Adam had always been kind to me, but he mostly kept to himself, avoiding the drama that surrounded Vivian and Lila. One afternoon, he called me out of the blue. "I heard about the gala," he said, his voice sympathetic. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how they treated you. It's not right." His words brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Adam, that means more than you know. You don't deserve this, Kate," he continued, "and you're not alone. If there's anything I can do, just let me know." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. In the weeks that followed, Adam's words lingered in my mind. I had been so consumed by Vivian and Lila's hostility, by Ethan's passivity, that I hadn't considered I might have allies, even within their family. That small spark of hope was enough to keep me going, though I wasn't sure where it would lead. It started with a conversation I didn't realize I needed. Adam invited me for coffee, a rare gesture that I accepted with hesitation. We met at a cozy cafe on the edge of town, far removed from the world of high society luncheons and gala drama. "I don't get it," I admitted after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "Why are you sticking your neck out for me? You're Vivian's son too." Adam stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "You're right, I am, but I'm also tired of seeing her treat people like pawns in her game. You're not the first person she's tried to tear down, but you're the first one who stood up to her." His words both comforted and unsettled me. I don't feel like I'm standing up to her. Most days, it feels like I'm barely holding on. "That's because you're fighting alone," he said simply. "You shouldn't have to." Adam's support emboldened me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Together, we began to strategize ways to reclaim my dignity and stand up to Vivian and Lila. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about drawing boundaries and demanding respect. "You can't play their game," Adam advised during one of our many conversations. "They'll always have the upper hand, but you can change the rules." "How?" I asked, skeptical but intrigued. "By showing them they can't control you. Start by building your own network, your own reputation. Show them, and Ethan, that you don't need their approval." It was a daunting idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had been so focused on fitting into their world that I had lost sight of my own strengths. It was time to change that. The first step was reconnecting with who I was before I met Ethan. I dusted off my old portfolio and began freelancing as a graphic designer, a career I had put on hold after our wedding. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my confidence, landing a few small but meaningful clients. Vivian and Lila, of course, caught wind of my efforts and wasted no time belittling them. "Oh, how quaint," Lila remarked at a dinner party. "A little hobby to keep you busy." I smiled sweetly, refusing to take the bait. "Actually, it's a full-time career, and it's going quite well, thank you." Their barbs didn't sting as much anymore. I was learning to see them for what they were: insecure, manipulative women who thrived on making others feel small. But the real turning point came during yet another family gathering, a charity event Vivian was hosting at her estate. Adam had encouraged me to attend, not to prove anything to them but to myself. The evening started predictably enough, with Vivian and Lila playing their usual games of thinly veiled insults and backhanded compliments. But things escalated when Vivian, in a theatrical show of generosity, announced a sizable donation to the charity on behalf of the entire family. She then turned to me with a saccharine smile. "Kate, dear, would you like to say a few words on behalf of Ethan and yourself?" It was a trap, and I knew it. If I declined, I'd look ungrateful. If I accepted, I'd be stepping into her spotlight. But this time, I was ready. I took the microphone, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Thank you, Vivian, for your generous donation," I began. "It's truly inspiring to see such support for a cause so close to my heart." I paused, meeting her gaze. "In fact, Ethan and I have also made a contribution, one that reflects our personal values and priorities. Because at the end of the day, what truly matters is not just the size of the donation, but the sincerity behind it." The room erupted in polite applause, but the look on Vivian's face was priceless. For the first time, I had outmaneuvered her on her own turf. After the event, Ethan pulled me aside, his expression unreadable. "Where did that come from?" he asked, not unkindly. "What do you mean?" I replied, feigning innocence. "You were so composed, confident." "It's not like you." I bristled at his words, but chose to see the silver lining. "Maybe it's who I've always been, Ethan. You just haven't noticed." To my surprise, he didn't argue. Instead, he seemed thoughtful, almost introspective. It was the first time in months I felt like he was truly seeing me. In the days following the event, I continued to focus on my work and personal growth, refusing to let Vivian and Lila's antics consume me. Adam remained a steadfast ally, offering encouragement and advice when I needed it most. But the real breakthrough came when Ethan finally confronted his mother. "I'd been thinking about what you said at the event," he told me one evening. "And you're right. I've let them control us too much. That stops now." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same team. Vivian and Lila didn't change overnight, of course. But they began to sense that their grip on Ethan, and me, was loosening. I stopped engaging with their drama, and Ethan started standing up for me in small but meaningful ways. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Vivian's control didn't dissipate easily. True to form, she staged one last attempt to reassert her dominance. She orchestrated a lavish gala under the guise of celebrating Ethan's business success, but used it as an opportunity to showcase her influence over her family. As the night unfolded, it became clear that I was the centerpiece of her unspoken narrative. She made subtle jabs about my career, my background, and even our marriage. Lila, ever her mother's loyal soldier, followed suit. But this time, I didn't crumble. "I have to hand it to you, Vivian," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You know how to command attention. But I think it's time we all stop pretending that your way is the only way." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling over the crowd. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her composure slipping for just a moment before she recovered with a brittle smile. "I only want what's best for my son," she replied, her tone icy. "And so do I said. "But what's best for him, and for us, is to build a life on our terms, not yours." To my surprise and relief, Ethan stepped forward, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. "Kate's right," he said, his voice steady. "It's time I stop letting you dictate how we live our lives. I love you, Mom, but we're building something together, and we need space to do that." Vivian looked as though she'd been struck. For years, she had wielded her authority without question, and now her son, the one she'd always counted on, was drawing a line. The power dynamic shifted in that moment, and everyone in the room felt it. Life didn't transform overnight, but the changes were palpable. Vivian and Lila, while still formidable, no longer had the same hold over us. They tested boundaries occasionally, but Ethan and I held firm, presenting a united front. My career flourished as I took on bigger projects and found a supportive community of peers and mentors. Ethan, inspired by my independence, started exploring ways to step out of his mother's shadow in his own professional life. Our relationship grew stronger too. We learned to communicate better, to lean on each other rather than pulling away when things got tough. The challenges we had faced together became the foundation for something deeper and more resilient. Adam remained a trusted confidant, offering wisdom and humor when we needed it most. He even helped bridge the gap between us and Vivian, softening her sharp edges over time. "She'll never admit it," Adam told me one day, "but she respects you. You stood up to her in a way no one else ever has." It wasn't the kind of victory I had once imagined. There were no dramatic apologies or sudden transformations. But I had learned that true strength didn't come from forcing others to change. It came from staying true to myself, no matter the opposition. One afternoon, as I worked on a new design project in the home office Ethan and I had renovated together, I paused to take it all in. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the hum of Ethan's laughter from the next room as he played with our dog, the quiet peace of knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be. The journey had been messy, painful, and at times overwhelming. But it had also been worth it. I had found my voice, my purpose, and a love that was stronger for the trials it had endured. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Life was not extraordinary, but it was ours. My husband, James, and I had been married for 8 years. We had a modest home, a small but steady savings account, and a routine that felt comforting. James worked as a mid-level manager in a growing tech company, and I handled freelance design work from home while taking care of our 6-year-old daughter, Emma. James often talked about his dream of becoming a director at his company, a goal he pursued with relentless ambition. I supported him wholeheartedly. Late nights at the office, I made sure dinner was ready when he returned. Weekend networking events, I juggled Emma's schedule so he could attend. James was the provider, the head of the family, or so I thought. One evening, James came home earlier than usual, an excited glint in his eye. "Big things are happening, honey," he said, kissing my forehead. "This might finally be our break." I smiled at him, feeling his enthusiasm radiate through the room. "Our break?" I teased. He nodded. "Yeah, our break. Once this next step goes through, we'll be set for life." Though he didn't share many details, I assumed it was another career opportunity. I had no reason to doubt him. James was a man who worked hard for everything he had. I trusted him completely. The first sign of trouble came a few weeks later. James started receiving strange phone calls late at night. He'd step outside to answer them, his voice low and tense. When I asked, he brushed it off as work stress and assured me that everything was fine. Soon after, I noticed other changes. James became irritable, snapping over minor things like misplaced keys or a delayed dinner. Our once happy home grew quieter, the tension so thick it felt like walking on eggshells. One afternoon, Emma brought me the mail, her tiny hands clutching a thick envelope. "Mommy, this looks important," she said, her big blue eyes watching as I opened it. It was a letter from the bank, addressed to me. The words blurred together in a haze of disbelief as I read the contents. "Loan confirmation, $1 million approved under the name of Claire Wilson." My heart pounded. I'd never applied for such a loan. Why would I? We didn't need $1 million. And even if we did, I certainly wouldn't take it out without a discussion. I stormed into the living room, clutching the letter. "James," I called, my voice shaking. He appeared in the doorway, his face pale as he saw the paper in my hand. "What's this?" I demanded. He hesitated, then sighed heavily. It's for us, Claire, for the future." I had to take the loan to invest in something big. Without telling me? I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. "You put my name on this without even asking?" James looked away, avoiding my gaze. "It's complicated, trust me, it'll pay off. You won't have to worry about a thing." But I couldn't shake the unease. Something about his explanation didn't add up. The way he avoided eye contact, the evasiveness in his tone, it wasn't like him. In the days that followed, the weight of that loan pressed down on me like a storm cloud. I tried to dig deeper, asking James more questions, but his answers grew curt and dismissive. Then, one evening, I overheard a conversation that shattered my world. James was in his office, talking on the phone. I paused outside the door, the sound of his voice sharp and agitated. "No, I told you, she doesn't know the whole story yet," he hissed. I had to use her name. My credit wouldn't have been enough. "Just give me more time." My stomach churned. James had lied to me about everything. Not only had he taken out a massive loan without my knowledge, but he'd also done it because his own finances were in shambles. He was using me as his scapegoat. That night, I confronted him. "I heard you," I said, standing in the kitchen while he poured himself a drink. He froze, his hand tightening around the glass. "Heard what?" "The phone call. You lied to me, James. You're in debt, aren't you? That loan wasn't for us. It was to cover your mistakes." James turned to face me, his expression hardening. "Claire, you don't understand how business works. I had no choice." "You had a choice," I snapped. "You could have told me the truth instead of dragging me into your mess." His response was chilling. "Don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be," he said coldly. "You'll thank me when everything works out." But I couldn't just brush it aside. That night, as I lay awake, I realized the man I thought I knew, the man I trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. In the days after confronting James, the air between us grew colder. Every glance, every word, was laced with tension. My trust in him, once unshakable, now felt like a fragile thread ready to snap. But I didn't have the luxury to dwell on emotions. I had to act. The loan was in my name, and if James's so-called plan fell apart, I'd be the one left to deal with the fallout. One morning, while James was at work, I decided to investigate. I sifted through his desk drawers and filing cabinets, looking for any clue about what he'd gotten us into. At first, all I found were old bills and office supplies. Then, tucked away in the back of a drawer, I discovered a folder marked private. Inside were documents that made my heart sink. Bank statements showed staggering withdrawals from our savings. Money I'd assumed was still there. Worse, there were contracts for what appeared to be a risky business investment. The terms were clear: if the venture failed, the entire debt would fall on me. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. James hadn't just lied, he'd gambled with our future. That evening, I waited for James to come home, the folder sitting on the coffee table like a bomb waiting to explode. When he walked through the door, his face hardened the moment he saw it. "What's this, James?" I demanded, my voice steady but laced with anger. When were you planning to tell me you emptied our savings and tied me to your failed business scheme? He rubbed his temples, his frustration evident. Claire, I told you, I'm fixing everything. You don't understand how these things work. Don't patronize me, I snapped, my voice breaking. You put us at risk, James. You put Emma at risk. How could you do this to your family? His expression shifted to something colder, almost dismissive. I didn't think you'd get it, he said, turning away. You're always so focused on playing it safe. The word stung. Was that how he saw me? As some obstacle to his ambitions? Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. James spent more and more time away from home, claiming he was handling the situation, but I wasn't convinced. His evasiveness, his growing distance, it felt like he was slipping away entirely. One evening, I overheard another phone call. This time, James wasn't hiding his tone of desperation. I don't care what it takes, he said, his voice cracking. I need more time, just don't let it get back to her. Who was he talking to, and what was he so afraid I'd find out? The breaking point came when a stranger showed up at our door. He was a sharply dressed man, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression that was all business. Mrs. Wilson? He asked. Yes? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Thompson. He's concerned about the delays in your loan payments and wanted to ensure you were aware of the terms. The blood drained from my face. What delays? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man frowned, flipping through his papers. Your payments are already 2 months overdue. If they're not resolved soon, the matter will escalate to legal proceedings. I stood there, stunned. James hadn't just lied, he'd been defaulting on the loan while pretending everything was under control. That night, when James finally came home, I was waiting for him, the weight of the stranger's words pressing down on me like a vice. Who's Mr. Thompson? I asked, my tone icy. James froze, his face pale. Why are you asking about him? Because his representative came by today. Apparently, my loan is overdue. Care to explain? He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. Claire, I didn't want to worry you. I'm working on it. Stop lying, I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. You've been lying to me for months. James, I don't even know who you are anymore. For the first time, he looked genuinely defeated. I didn't mean for it to get this bad, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I thought I could fix it before you found out. But his confession did little to ease the storm inside me. James had betrayed my trust, jeopardized our future, and dragged me into a mess I hadn't asked for. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't rely on James to fix this. If I wanted to protect Emma and myself, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. Little did I know, my decision would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The morning after my confrontation with James, I woke up with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't going to sit around and let this disaster spiral further out of control. Emma and I deserved better. If James couldn't or wouldn't fix things, I would. I started by calling the loan officer. Mr. Thompson, I needed answers, and I wasn't going to rely on James's evasions anymore. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Thompson said when I reached him. It's unusual for us to hear directly from clients in this situation. Your husband has been the one managing the account. Well, I'm managing it now, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Can you send me the full details of the loan agreement and any outstanding payments? He hesitated for a moment. Of course, but I must warn you, some of the terms your husband agreed to are quite steep. When the documents arrived later that day, I could hardly believe what I was reading. The interest rate alone was astronomical, and the penalties for defaulting were even worse. James had effectively tied us to a financial noose. I spent the next few days combing through every piece of paperwork, trying to find a way out. At the same time, I started researching local legal aid and financial advisors. I was determined to find someone who could help me untangle this mess. That's when I came across the name of a lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. Her name was Margaret Hayes, and she had a reputation for being relentless in protecting her clients. I made an appointment and walked into her office, with all my documents in hand. Margaret was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s, with an air of confidence that immediately put me at ease. Let me get this straight, she said after reviewing the papers. Your husband took out this loan in your name without fully disclosing the terms to you? Yes, I said, feeling a mix of anger and shame. I didn't know what I was signing. He said it was for us, our family. She nodded thoughtfully. It's not uncommon for people to trust their spouses implicitly, but this is serious. The terms are predatory, and if we can prove you were misled, There may be a way to challenge this legally. Her words were a lifeline, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of hope. While Margaret worked on the legal front, I threw myself into finding a way to bring in extra income. I had left my job years ago to focus on raising Emma, but now, desperate times called for desperate measures. I started applying to every job I could find, from administrative positions to part-time retail work. Rejection after rejection came in, each one a blow to my already fragile confidence. One day, after yet another fruitless job hunt, I sat on a park bench with Emma. She played on the swings, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around us. Watching her laugh and squeal as she soared higher, I felt a pang of guilt. She deserved stability, happiness, things I wasn't sure I could give her anymore. That's when I noticed a familiar face across the park. It was Sarah, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We'd drifted apart after high school, but back then, she'd always been the one to dream big. "Claire," she said, approaching with a look of surprise, "is that you?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's been a long time, Sarah." We spent the next hour catching up. When I told her about my struggles, she listened intently. "You know," she said, "I just started working at a new company. They're always looking for reliable people, and I could put in a good word for you." It felt like fate. Sarah gave me the details, and by the end of the week, I had an interview lined up. The job wasn't glamorous, it was an entry-level administrative role, but it was something. The office was bustling, and the pace was demanding, but I threw myself into the work with everything I had. One day, as I was sorting through a stack of paperwork, I overheard two senior managers talking about a major upcoming project. They were brainstorming ideas, but seemed stuck. "Excuse me," I said, hesitantly interrupting. "I couldn't help but overhear. Maybe you could try this approach?" They looked at me with surprise, but one of them nodded. "That's actually a great idea," he said. From that day on, they began to notice me. Slowly but surely, I started earning their trust and respect. Meanwhile, Margaret called with good news. "We filed a formal complaint about the loan," she said. "If this goes to court, there's a strong chance we can argue that the agreement was predatory. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was progress." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life again. But just as things were starting to look up, James threw another curveball. One evening, he came home with an announcement that left me speechless. "I've decided to sell the house," he said casually, as if it were no big deal. "What?" I said, my voice rising. "You can't just decide that on your own, James. This is our home. It's not up for debate," he said coldly. "We need the money, and this is the only way." His words felt like a slap in the face. Selling the house meant uprooting Emma, destroying the one stable thing she had left. That night, as I sat in the empty living room, I realized that James wasn't going to stop. If I wanted to protect Emma and myself, I'd have to find a way to stand up to him once and for all. While I was watching TV, my husband stormed in, his face darkening with rage after my mother-in-law whispered something to him. Without warning, he shouted, "Why are you wasting time?" and smashed the TV, my father's treasured gift, on my head. Blood streamed down as I pleaded for help, but he showed no mercy. Dragging me by my hair, he hurled me out of the house, leaving me trembling in the cold. Shaking and desperate, I called my brother, Daniel. When he arrived, the nightmare only deepened. What followed was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. My name is Harper Collins, and this is the story I never thought I'd live to tell, a journey through love, betrayal, and finding strength amidst unimaginable pain. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be recounting this, I wouldn't have believed them. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? It all began when I met Jonathan Carter. At 26, I was living in Seattle, working as a graphic designer. My life was simple, steady, until Jonathan walked in. He was a 30-year-old banker, effortlessly charming and attentive, making me feel like the most important person in the world. Our whirlwind romance was filled with candlelit dinners, waterfront walks, and long conversations about our dreams. 6 months later, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. Friends called us the perfect couple, and I believed them, but perfection is often an illusion. After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. It felt like a dream come true. I poured myself into building our life together, cooking Jonathan's favorite meals and making our home warm and inviting. He worked long hours, and though I missed him, I told myself it was for our future. The cracks began to show when his mother, Patricia, moved in a few months after the wedding. Officially, she was there to help out, but her presence quickly revealed itself as controlling. A retired schoolteacher in her late 50s, Patricia carried an air of authority. She criticized everything, how I managed the house, dressed, and even cooked. Despite my efforts to get along, nothing pleased her. Worse, Jonathan always sided with her. "Mom's just trying to help," he'd say dismissively. One night, after a long day of chores, I settled on the sofa to watch TV. It was a small comfort, reminding me of my late father. The TV had been his gift to me, and it brought a sense of peace. That evening, Jonathan came home late, looking tired but greeting me with a brief smile. For a moment, I hoped for a calm night. Then Patricia appeared, whispering something in his ear. His expression shifted instantly, his eyes cold and angry. "Get up," he barked. "Go to the kitchen and make me a fresh meal." Confused, I replied, "Dinner is ready. I kept it warm for you." "I don't want that," he snapped. "I want something fresh, now." Exhausted, I hesitated. "Jonathan, I've been on my feet all day. Can't you?" Before I could finish, he erupted. "How dare you talk back to me?" He crossed the room in a fury, grabbing the TV, my father's TV. He lifted it above his head and slammed it down. The corner struck me, and pain exploded through my skull. I crumpled to the floor. Blood trickling as shock paralyzed me. "Maybe this will teach you to obey me," he growled. Patricia stood nearby, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "You don't deserve to live here if you can't respect us," she sneered. Bleeding and trembling, I begged for help, but they were merciless. Jonathan dragged me to the door and shoved me outside into the cold night. With nowhere else to go, I called Daniel. When he answered, I broke down. "Daniel, please, I need help." "I'm coming," he said firmly. "Where are you?" When he arrived, his face was a mix of worry and fury. He helped me into his car and drove straight to the hospital. "We're going to fix this," he said, gripping the wheel tightly. "He's not getting away with this." As the doctor tended to my wounds, a flicker of hope emerged. I didn't have to endure this anymore. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would fight for myself, no matter the cost. I hesitated, unsure where to begin, but I knew I had to tell Daniel everything. Taking a deep breath, I started from the beginning, recounting every instance of Patricia's interference, Jonathan's growing coldness, and my desperate attempts to please them, hoping things would improve. Finally, I described the horrifying moment when Jonathan smashed the TV on my head. Daniel listened intently, his fists clenched and jaw tight. By the time I finished, he was seething. "He's a monster," Daniel said, his voice low and full of rage. "And his mother is no better. Harper, you can't go back there, ever." "I know," I whispered, tears streaming down my face, "but what can I do? They've made it clear I don't belong there. I don't even have my belongings." "Forget your things," Daniel said firmly. "What matters is your safety. We'll figure the rest out. But first, we're going to make sure they pay for what they've done to you." I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. Daniel was my rock, and I knew he wouldn't let me face this battle on my own. Over the next few days, I stayed with Daniel, trying to recover both physically and emotionally. He helped me file for divorce, a daunting but liberating process. Cutting ties with Jonathan felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had lost. Yet, as freeing as it wasn't enough. Anger and humiliation burned inside me. I wanted justice. One evening, as I sat in Daniel's living room, I said, "I want to do more than just leave him. I want to expose him for what he really is." Daniel's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's not the man he pretends to be," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I've always had this feeling he's hiding something, the late hours, the unexplained phone calls. It doesn't add up." Daniel nodded slowly. "You might be right. If he's hiding something, we'll find it. Let's dig deeper." That's when we decided to hire a private investigator. Daniel found Jack Lewis, a seasoned professional with a reputation for uncovering the truth. When we met with Jack, I explained my suspicions about Jonathan's activities at the bank. Jack listened carefully, took detailed notes, and promised to begin investigating immediately. The waiting was agonizing. Every day, I wondered what Jack would uncover. Part of me worried I was overreacting, but another part, the part that had endured Jonathan's lies, knew there was something dark beneath the surface. 2 weeks later, Jack called. "I've found something," he said. "Can we meet in person?" My heart pounded as Daniel and I drove to Jack's office. When we arrived, Jack laid out the evidence he had gathered. The truth was worse than I had imagined. Jonathan wasn't just controlling, he was a criminal. He had been embezzling money from the bank, laundering it through fake accounts, and funneling it into offshore holdings. Jack presented documents, account statements, and surveillance photos. It was undeniable. I stared at the evidence, my mind reeling. I knew he was hiding something, I said softly. "This is huge," Daniel said, his voice filled with determination. "We're taking this to the authorities." Jack nodded. "You should, but be careful. People like Jonathan don't react well when they're cornered." A chill ran down my spine, but I knew Jack was right. Jonathan was dangerous, and this was no longer just about me. His actions had hurt others, and I couldn't let him continue. The next day, Daniel and I went to the police with Jack's evidence. Detective Rebecca Hayes, the officer assigned to the case, listened carefully as we presented everything. "This is solid," she said, flipping through the files. "We'll start an investigation immediately." Leaving the station, I felt a mix of fear, relief, and empowerment. For so long, I had felt trapped, helpless. Now, I was fighting back, and for the first time in a long time, I believed I could win. The days after meeting Detective Hayes were a blur of nervous energy. The police took over the investigation, and I anxiously awaited updates. Jack's words echoed in my mind. "Jonathan is dangerous." I tried to stay busy, throwing myself into anything that could distract me. Daniel, as always, was my rock, offering constant support, but even his reassurances couldn't fully quell my fears. I knew that once Jonathan discovered the investigation, there would be no turning back. About a week later, Detective Hayes called us in. When we arrived, she gestured for us to sit. "We've made significant progress," she said, opening a folder on her desk. "Thanks to the evidence your investigator provided, we've confirmed Jonathan is involved in a large-scale money laundering operation. He's been embezzling funds for over 2 years, using shell companies to cover his tracks. The scope of his crimes is massive." Hearing it spelled out left me breathless. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaky. "We've built a strong case against him," Detective Hayes replied. "We're monitoring his movements and preparing to make an arrest. But you need to be careful. Once he realizes the net is closing, he might try to contact you, or worse." I nodded, gripping the edge of my chair. "I won't let him get to me," I said, though deep down, I was terrified. As we left the station, Daniel turned to me. "You're handling this incredibly well, Harper." For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of pride. I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until justice was served. The weight of everything settled on me as I sat in Daniel's living room, staring out the window. My thoughts drifted back to the beginning, when Jonathan had held my hand, promised me happiness, and made me believe in a future together. How could the same man who once vowed to love and protect me turn into someone who destroyed everything we had, smashed a TV over my head, and embezzled millions? The betrayal was unfathomable, but instead of breaking me, it steeled my resolve. He had taken enough. Now, he had to face the consequences. The days leading to Jonathan's arrest were tense. I couldn't stop imagining how he would react. Would he lash out or play innocent? A part of me dreaded the confrontation, but a stronger part, one I barely recognized, wanted to see him fall. When Detective Hayes called to inform me that Jonathan had been taken into custody, I felt a rush of emotions. "He didn't resist," she said, "but he's claiming innocence, saying it's all a misunderstanding." "Of course he is," I replied bitterly. It was so like Jonathan to paint himself as the victim. Still, knowing he was behind bars, even temporarily, gave me a sense of safety I hadn't felt in months. Preparing for the trial was grueling. Memories of Jonathan haunted me, his disdainful glares, the nights I cried myself to sleep, and the moment he threw me out, bleeding and broken. But those memories, as painful as they were, strengthened me. I was determined to stand up, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless. The day of the trial came quickly. The courtroom, with its high ceilings and somber atmosphere, was intimidating. I sat next to Daniel, clutching his hand as Jonathan was brought in. He looked calm, even smug, as if he believed he could manipulate his way out of this. But as the prosecution laid out the evidence, documents, surveillance photos, and Jack's testimony, his composure faltered. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand on shaky legs, but spoke with a steady heart. I recounted everything, the abuse, the lies, and the night he smashed the TV over my head. My voice wavered at times, but I didn't stop. I refused to let him silence me again. Jonathan's defense tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife, But the evidence against him was overwhelming. By the end of the trial, it was clear to everyone in the courtroom that he was guilty. The judge's verdict was swift. Jonathan was convicted on multiple counts of embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over me. Jonathan couldn't hurt me anymore. Walking out of the courthouse with Daniel, the sun shone brightly, but I still felt the weight of everything sinking in. "You did it, Harper," Daniel said, his voice full of pride. "You stood up to him." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Moving forward wasn't easy. The scars, both physical and emotional, remained, and there were nights when I woke up reliving his violence. But each day, I reminded myself of my strength. I had survived. Reclaiming my independence became a crucial part of my healing. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a space free from Jonathan's shadow. Work became another refuge. Pouring myself into design projects helped rebuild my confidence. My boss, always supportive, gave me opportunities to grow, and with each success, I proved to myself that I was capable. Through it all, Daniel remained by my side, my constant source of strength. Whether he was bringing groceries or simply sitting with me, his presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. One day, I came across a photo from my wedding. In it, Jonathan smiled at me, his arm wrapped around my waist. I stared at it, trying to reconcile the man in the photo with the monster he became. Finally, I tore it in half and threw it away. It felt symbolic, like I was finally letting go of the version of him I had once loved. Jonathan's sentencing sent shockwaves through the community. His crimes made headlines, and the bank issued a public apology for its oversight. Patricia, his mother, moved away, likely out of embarrassment. Part of me wanted to confront her, but I realized it wasn't worth my energy. My focus was better spent on myself and my future. One evening, Daniel and I went out to celebrate at a small Italian restaurant. As we clinked glasses, he raised a toast. "To your freedom." "To my freedom," I echoed, smiling, a genuine smile from a place of peace. Looking back now, I see how far I've come. What happened to me was horrific, but it didn't break me. It taught me that I deserve better, that I have a voice, and that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way out. Jonathan underestimated me. He underestimated my strength. Now, as I look ahead, I know one thing for certain: I'm free to live, to dream, and to build a life on my own terms. That, to me, is the greatest victory of all.
I still remember that rainy Tuesday morning when my world fell apart. After 8 years of marriage, I came home from my night shift at the local diner to find the locks changed and my belongings in garbage bags on the front porch. My hands trembled as I called my husband David, only to hear his cold voice. "It's over, Sarah. I've moved on. Don't try to come back." I stood there, rain soaking through my waitress uniform, staring at the house we bought together. Well, the house I bought, technically, my inheritance from my beloved grandfather, had paid for the down payment, but David's name was on all the paperwork. I trusted him completely when he said it was easier that way with his credit score. What a fool I'd been. My phone buzzed again. A text notification from our joint bank account. Balance, $0. 8 years of savings gone. My separate account, also emptied. He'd had access to everything because I'd trusted him, because I believed in our marriage. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning. With nowhere else to go, I loaded what I could into my old Honda Civic, the only thing still in my name, and drove to my mother-in-law Patricia's house. Maybe there had been some mistake. Maybe she could help me understand what was happening. I should have known better. Patricia opened her door wearing her signature pearl necklace and disapproving frown. Behind her, I could see David's sister Amanda smirking. Well, Patricia said, looking down her nose at my wet, bedraggled appearance. "I suppose you're here to beg for money now that David's finally seen sense." "Patricia, please," my voice cracked. "I don't understand what's happening. Everything's gone. The house, our savings." "Oh, honey," she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Did you really think someone like David would stay with a waitress forever? He's finally moving up in the world, and he needs someone more suitable." She adjusted her designer watch. "Though I must say, you lasted longer than I expected. Most gold diggers would have shown their true colors years ago." "Gold digger?" I whispered, stunned. "I paid for our house. I supported him through his MBA. With your grandfather's money, Amanda chimed in. Which you've been lording over David for years. Well, now he's paid you back. Guess you'll have to find another rich old man to mooch off of. I stood there, rain mixing with my tears, as 8 years of memories rewrote themselves in my mind. All those family dinners where they'd subtly mocked my job. The way they'd dismissed my contribution to David's success. How they'd never accepted me, the poor girl from the wrong side of town who dared to marry into their precious family. Where is he? I asked, my voice stronger now. Where's David? On his honeymoon, Patricia said with a cruel smile. With Jessica. You remember her? His new executive assistant. They've been seeing each other for months. She comes from a good family, you know. She'll be much better at supporting David's career than you ever were. The world spun around me. Jessica. The woman you'd hired 6 months ago, who he'd insisted on working late with so often, who'd smiled sweetly at me at the company Christmas party while apparently sleeping with my husband. You knew. I realized, looking between Patricia and Amanda. You all knew he was cheating. Of course we knew. Amanda rolled her eyes. We helped him plan everything. Jessica's father is on the board of David's company. This marriage will do wonders for his career. Unlike you, who's been holding him back with your embarrassing little waitress job. Now, Patricia said, reaching for her door, I suggest you leave before I call the police. And don't bother trying to fight this in court. Our family lawyer has everything handled. You signed a prenup, remember? You'll get nothing. The door slammed in my face, leaving me alone in the rain once again. That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot, too shocked and broken to even cry. The next day, I tried to check into a cheap motel, only to find my credit cards canceled. My phone was next. Apparently, it had been on David's plan. Within 48 hours, I had nothing but my car, the clothes in my garbage bags, and $237 in cash. I managed to find a bed at the local women's shelter. The irony wasn't lost on me. I volunteered here for years, never imagining I'd end up staying here myself. The shelter director, Grace, remembered me from my volunteer days and gave me a private room usually reserved for emergency cases. You're in shock, Sarah, she said gently, bringing me a cup of tea. But you're stronger than you know, and when you're ready, we'll help you fight back. I didn't believe her then. How could I fight back? David had taken everything, planned it all perfectly. He had his family's money, their lawyers, their connections. I was just a waitress with a worthless degree in social work, trying to make ends meet while supporting my husband's dreams. But Grace was right about one thing. I was in shock, so much so that I almost missed the most important detail of all, a detail that would change everything. It happened 3 days into my stay at the shelter. I was helping in the shelter's kitchen. I couldn't afford to pay for my stay, but I could at least cook when I heard excited whispers from the front office. The CEO of Montgomery Industries is here. What's Alexander Montgomery doing at our shelter? I heard he's doing a series of surprise visits to local charities. I froze, nearly dropping the pot I was holding. Montgomery Industries, David's company, the place he'd worked his way up to middle management, always complaining that he deserved more recognition, faster promotions. I'd never met anyone from his work. He'd always said I wouldn't fit in at corporate events. But I knew about Alexander Montgomery. Everyone in town did. The brilliant young CEO who'd taken over his father's company 5 years ago and transformed it into a tech giant. The businessman who put our small city on the map. The man who, if the gossip was true, had no patience for dishonesty or corruption in his company. Before I could decide whether to hide in the kitchen, Grace came rushing in. Sarah, Mr. Montgomery is asking to speak with all our residents. He's making a large donation and wants to hear their stories firsthand. Would you be comfortable joining the group? I looked down at my shelter-provided clothes, touched my unwashed hair. I don't know, Grace. I'm not really presentable. Nonsense, she said firmly. You're one of us now, and your story deserves to be heard. So that's how I found myself sitting in a circle with 15 other shelter residents, facing Alexander Montgomery himself. He wasn't what I expected. Younger than I'd imagined, maybe in his mid-30s, wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks. No fancy suit, no arrogant attitude. He listened intently to each woman's story, asking thoughtful questions, taking notes. Then it was my turn. I'm Sarah, I said quietly. I'm here because my husband emptied our accounts and changed the locks while I was at work. He works for your company, actually. Alexander Montgomery's head snapped up, his pen freezing mid-note. What did you say? I couldn't stop now. The whole story poured out. The 8 years of marriage, supporting David through his MBA, buying our house with my inheritance, discovering his affair with his executive assistant, his family's cruel dismissal. He's David Chen. I finished, my voice barely a whisper. In middle management, he just married Jessica Williams. Her father is on your board. The room was dead silent. Alexander Montgomery's face had gone completely still, his eyes intense. David Chen, he repeated slowly. The one who's been pushing for a senior director position, who's been claiming his wife is fully supportive of his career moves. I laughed bitterly. Supportive? I didn't even know he was divorcing me until I found my belongings in garbage bags. Grace, Alexander said suddenly, standing up. May I use your office for a moment? Mrs. Chen and I need to have a private conversation. It's Ms. Miller now, I corrected quietly. I'm going back to my maiden name. He nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. Ms. Miller, then. Please, come with me. As I followed him to Grace's office, I had no idea that this conversation would change everything. That within 24 hours, David's perfectly planned new life would begin to crumble. And it would all start with 5 simple words from Alexander Montgomery. I've been looking for you. I followed Alexander Montgomery into Grace's small office, my heart pounding. He closed the door and turned to face me, his expression intense. 5 years ago, he said, did you write a business proposal for a corporate-sponsored chain of community resource centers? My mouth fell open. How did you? It crossed my desk when I first became CEO, he continued. Brilliant concept, combining job training, childcare, and social services in economically disadvantaged areas. The financial projections were sound. The community impact analysis thorough. But when I tried to contact the author, Sarah Miller, she vanished. The email bounced back, the phone number was disconnected. I sank into a chair, memories flooding back. That was right after I married David. He said the proposal was too amateur, that it would embarrass him at work. He made me take it down from all the submission portals. Said I should focus on supporting his career instead. Alexander's jaw tightened. Do you know what happened to that proposal, Ms. Miller? Nothing, because your husband buried it. He accessed the company's submission system using his credentials and withdrew it without your knowledge. We found the digital trail during a system audit last year. We couldn't locate you. What? My voice shook. But why? Because David Chen has been taking credit for other people's work for years. We've suspected, but couldn't prove it. He's very careful. Very manipulative. Alexander sat on the edge of Grace's desk. The proposal's withdrawal caught our attention because it was exceptional. I've been looking for its author ever since. Tears filled my eyes. All those nights I'd worked on that proposal, dreaming of making a difference. All while David was apparently sabotaging me. There's more, Alexander said gently. 2 months ago, David presented a modified version of your proposal to the board. Claimed it was his original work, part of his bid for the senior director position. Jessica's father has been championing him for the role. A bitter laugh escaped me. So that's why he chose now to leave. He finally found a way to use my work for his advancement. Ms. Miller, Sarah. Alexander leaned forward. I'd like to offer you a job. As director of our new community impact division. Your original proposal will be the foundation, but you'll have full resources to expand it. Starting salary is $250,000, plus benefits and stock options. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. But I'm just a waitress. No, he said firmly. You're a brilliant strategist who's been systematically undermined by an abusive husband. That ends today. He pulled out his phone. With your permission, I'd like to call our legal team. David Chen committed corporate fraud by stealing and misrepresenting your work. That's grounds for immediate termination. My head spun. But his new wife, her father. Board member or not, fraud is fraud. And something tells me Mr. Williams won't be so supportive once he learns the truth about his new son-in-law. Everything moved quickly after that. Alexander's legal team arrived within the hour. They took my statement, gathered evidence. By morning, the truth about David's fraud was exposed. He was fired publicly, his corporate accounts frozen. Jessica's father, horrified by the scandal, immediately annulled their marriage. I wasn't there when it happened, but Amanda later told me in a desperate attempt to reconcile once she realized I was now a company director, that David and Jessica returned early from their honeymoon to find their keycards deactivated and security waiting. "How dare you?" David had apparently shouted at Alexander in the lobby. "Do you know who my new father-in-law is?" Alexander corrected calmly. "The marriage has been annulled, and Mr. Williams sends his regards, along with a recommendation that you find employment far, far away from our industry." That's when David saw me standing beside Alexander in a designer suit, a gift from the company's stylist. His face went white. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" "Taking back what's mine," I said calmly. "The proposal you stole, it's being implemented. The career you tried to destroy, it's flourishing. The woman you discarded, she's your new boss's right hand." Patricia and Amanda tried damage control, of course. Suddenly they were calling constantly, leaving tearful voicemails about family loyalty. But I had a new family now, the incredible team at Montgomery Industries, who welcomed my ideas and valued my contributions. The women's shelter where I'd stay became the pilot location for our first community resource center. Grace joined as program director. Within a year, we'd opened 10 more centers across the state. David, last I heard, he was working as a junior analyst in a small firm 3 states away. Jessica married a wealthy developer, and Patricia loves to complain about how her new daughter-in-law married down. As for me, well, that's another story. One that started with late nights working on center proposals with Alexander, strategy sessions that turned into dinner discussions, meetings that lingered long after the agenda was complete. "I'm not him," Alexander said one evening as we watched the sunset from his office. "I'll never try to dim your light." "I know," I replied, because I did know. I learned the difference between someone who wants to possess you and someone who wants to see you soar. 2 years after that rainy day when my world fell apart, I stood in the grand ballroom of the Montgomery Industries headquarters. Hundreds of employees and community members gathered to celebrate the opening of our 15th resource center. And now, the MC announced, "Please welcome our Community Impact Director and newest board member, Mrs. Sarah Montgomery." As I took the podium, my wedding ring catching the light, nothing flashy. Alexander knows I prefer elegant simplicity. I saw my old mother-in-law in the crowd. Patricia had wrangled an invitation through a business contact, no doubt hoping to reconcile now that I'd married up. But I wasn't the same woman she dismissed in the rain. Meeting her eyes, I smiled and began my speech. 5 years ago, I wrote a proposal about the power of community support, about how everyone deserves a chance to rebuild, to grow, to shine. Today, we're not just opening another center. We're making that vision reality. I paused, my hand resting on my slightly rounded belly, our first child still our secret for a few more weeks. Sometimes, life's greatest betrayals lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Sometimes, losing everything means making room for everything you've ever dreamed of. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living your truth so boldly that those who tried to break you become nothing but a footnote in your success story. Alexander squeezed my hand as the room erupted in applause. And in that moment, I sent a silent thank you to David. His cruelty had freed me. His betrayal had led me here. I'd lost a husband who dimmed my light, but I found a partner who helped me shine. I'd lost a fake family who valued status, but I built a real one based on love and respect. Most importantly, I found myself, the woman who'd always been there, waiting to emerge. Strong, capable, unstoppable. That night, as Alexander and I drove home to our modest house, we could afford bigger, but I love this one's cozy garden, he asked. Any regrets? I touched my growing belly, thought of our expanding centers, our passionate team, our future together. Just one, I smiled. I should have checked the company submission portal years ago. He laughed, the sound warm in the quiet car. Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. And you know what? He was right. Sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as its cruelest moments. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you never knew you were looking for. And sometimes a rainy Tuesday morning when your world falls apart becomes the first chapter of your greatest adventure.
Poor people will rub off on you. Don't even sanitize. Some carry antiseptic for garlic because it's the dry season. It's unclear whether Wendy, my mother-in-law, carries it for that reason or another, but one thing is certain, her actions reek of malice. Mom, let's go home, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. Okay, I understand, let's go, she replied, her tone distant. On the way home, Mary, my daughter, said something that sent a chill through the air. So, your company's going to go bankrupt? Her words struck like a thunderbolt, her anger cutting through the cool evening breeze. A life marked by love and loss. My name is Sasha James, I turned 55 this year, I don't have a husband, my daughter, Maria, was born 25 years ago, and on that very day, I lost the love of my life. My husband, a company CEO, was always busy but never too busy to love me. He proposed despite my doubts about being a CEO's wife. I thought we could make it work, but fate had other plans. The day Mary was born, my husband rushed to the hospital to see us. He had recently undergone heart bypass surgery, and while it seemed successful, his heart gave out on the way. He never made it back. The delivery room, once filled with the joy of a new life, became a place of mourning. Despite my grief, I had to keep going. For Mary, raising her alone was an exhausting journey. When Mary was young, her preschool teacher reprimanded her for being unkind to a friend. I scolded her harshly, and though she tried to explain, she ended up in tears. Every day was a struggle, but over time, she matured, learning to communicate better. Being a single mother was challenging, and I often faced prejudice. Still, Mary and I made countless precious memories together. A daughter's new chapter. Mary graduated from college and recently turned 25. Happy birthday, Mary, I said, presenting a homemade cake. Wow, Mom, you made this? It's amazing. Thank you, Mary beamed, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. This might be our last birthday celebration, just the two of us, I said, glancing at the engagement ring on her finger. Next year, we'll celebrate with everyone. Mary had come home days earlier, her face glowing as she showed off the silver ring. David proposed, she announced. Her joy reminded me of my own engagement day. Mary and David had been together since high school, weathering nearly a decade of challenges to reach this point. Watching her smile, I couldn't help but feel bittersweet. It'll be lonely when she leaves, I muttered, staring at the flickering candle. Unexpectedly, tears welled up and rolled down my cheeks. Mom, thank you for everything, Mary said, her voice steady. Even after I get married, I'll always be your daughter. Welcoming David. David came to our home to formally ask for Mary's hand in marriage. Sasha, thank you for looking after us for 10 years, he said earnestly. I promise to make Mary happy, please let me marry her. What should I do? I teased, breaking the tension. Mom, stop, Mary laughed, her cheeks turning pink. We all chuckled, and the sadness of Mary leaving began to lift. Seeing them together, I knew her happiness lay with David. David was already like family, we had taken trips together, and his respect for tradition felt almost unnecessary. Still, I admired his sincerity. David, I said, Mary has always struggled with expressing her emotions. Please be patient with her. When things are difficult, talk them through. But if she does something like cheating, I smirked. Bring her to me immediately. Laughter filled the room, echoing in my heart. Meeting Wendy. David's mother, Wendy, ran her own company, which caused repeated delays for the family meeting. Mom, it's just hard to find a time since she's a CEO, Mary explained. I understand, I said, though I couldn't shake my unease. After several cancellations, Wendy finally set a date. Last Saturday of the month. Don't cancel again, Mary insisted, her tone sharper than usual. When the day of the meeting arrived, my uneasiness grew. I dressed in formal attire, anticipating that Wendy might criticize casual clothing. Mom, you don't have to dress so formally for this, Mary said, trying to reassure me. I just have a feeling Wendy would find fault if I didn't, I replied. We arrived at the restaurant early, waiting for David and Wendy. When they arrived, Wendy's presence immediately dominated the room. Her aura was polished, sharp, and intimidating. I'm Wendy, David's mother, she said curtly. Her movements were graceful, her tone commanding, and her gaze cut like a knife. Without waiting for pleasantries, she sighed and led the way inside. Sorry about my mom, David whispered apologetically. She's always been like this, even I find her difficult. It's okay, David, I said, forcing a smile. She seems like someone from another world. almost like nobility. At the word nobility, David's expression clouded, but he said nothing. Mom's already inside. Let's go, Mary urged. The atmosphere felt heavy as I followed them into a private dining room. Wendy was already seated in the place of honor, her posture perfect and deliberate. Every detail of her demeanor seemed calculated to make a statement. David, sit here, Mary, there, and you, by the door, Wendy instructed, gesturing coldly. It felt like she was subtly assigning me the lowest rank in the room. I've heard you have back problems, Wendy added with a thin smile. You'll need to be near the door in case you need the restroom, perhaps even a wheelchair. Her words were dripping with condescension. Thank you for the consideration, I said with a calm smile, but wouldn't it be better for you to sit by the door? You might need it more. Wendy's face hardened, clearly unused to being addressed in such a manner. No need to worry about me, thank you for your concern, she replied icily, her smile never reaching her eyes. The meal began in stiff silence, broken only by Wendy's smug remarks. Didn't your parents teach you the proper order to eat food? Wendy said, her tone dripping with superiority. You start with soup, then bread, followed by the main dish, and finally the side dishes. It's common sense, and basic manners. She proceeded to lecture us on the importance of this peculiar dining sequence, explaining that soup stimulates digestion. David smiled awkwardly, clearly accustomed to these rigid rules, but this wasn't how I had raised Mary. I had only taught her the basics: don't chew loudly, don't talk with your mouth full, and never walk around during meals. Wendy's elaborate etiquette seemed more suited for a royal banquet than everyday life. When Mary reached for the main dish first, Wendy's eyes flashed with disapproval. What Wendy is saying might be correct, I said, breaking the tense silence, but isn't the heart of manners about consideration for others? Criticizing someone's lack of manners is, in itself, poor manners. Wendy's face flushed with anger, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Talking to someone so uncultured is exhausting, she snapped. David, you should reconsider this marriage. Mary's mother is too crude for our family. Turning to Mary, she added, perhaps you should cut ties with this woman and learn proper manners if you want to be our daughter-in-law. David pleaded with her to stop, but she ignored him, her tirade building. Then, without warning, Wendy pulled a bottle from her bag and dumped its contents over my head. The stinging smell of alcohol filled the air. Poor people rub off on you, she said with a smirk. You need to be sanitized. Shock froze me in place as the liquid dripped from my hair. Mom, let's go, Mary said, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Yes, I said, rising slowly, trying to maintain my composure. David stood frozen, his face pale with disbelief. Mary took my hand and glared at Wendy, who simply smirked in return. I'm sorry, David, Mary said coldly, but don't apologize for her. She may think she's from a higher class, but soon enough, your company will go bankrupt. Wendy's smirk faltered as Mary's words cut through the tension like ice. Mary didn't wait for a response. She wiped the liquid from my clothes and led me out. We never returned to see Wendy again. David's apology. Days later, David arrived at our home, looking pale and exhausted. I should have apologized sooner, he said, his voice trembling, but I've been trying to convince my mother to admit she was wrong. She won't listen, so I came to apologize on my own. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his words. Though David wasn't my son, he had been part of our lives for 10 years, and it hurt to see him in such distress. Come inside, David, I said gently. Let's have some tea. You've been through a lot. Are you okay? He hesitated before answering, as if gathering the courage to share what was on his mind. To be honest, I've always hated my mom, he confessed. She's always demanded repayment for raising me, always pressuring me to meet her expectations. I could imagine his situation all too well. I was told from a young age that I was the heir, that I had to follow the family's plan, but in high school, I rebelled. She wanted me to attend a prestigious private school, but I chose a public school with a baseball team instead. His face softened at the memory. That's where I met Mary, he said, his voice steadying. She was the team manager. I fell in love with her, and no matter what my mother says, I want to marry her. Please let me marry her. David trembled as he knelt on the floor, tears glistening in his eyes. David, look up, I said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This isn't about me, it's about you and Mary. Over these 10 years, I've seen how deeply you care for her. If you love her that much, you don't need my permission, you already have my blessing. Tears streamed down David's face as relief washed over him. I trusted David with Mary's happiness. Slowly, he lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. The weight of his mother's actions must have terrified him, making him fear that everything he cherished might be lost. Yet, those tears revealed just how deeply he cared for Mary. David, I said softly, if you truly want to make Mary happy, you need to break free from your past. I understand, he replied, his voice trembling. This is about my mother, isn't it? I nodded silently. I'm tired of living in fear of her, he admitted, his voice growing steadier. My father, who's still in the hospital, was the only one who ever understood me. He once told me that my mother could never see beyond her own ambitions. For his sake, I've made up my mind. I met his gaze firmly. I'll support you and Mary, David, but it's up to you to take the next step. I understand, he said resolutely. I'll do it. The day finally came. Wendy arrived at the restaurant with a sour expression, clearly displeased. What is this cheap place? She asked, her voice filled with disdain as she scanned the humble family restaurant. It was a setting far removed from the elegance she was accustomed to. These are the papers for the adoption, I said, sliding the documents across the table. Adoption? She repeated, her confusion evident. Yes, David is officially joining our family. This is outrageous, Wendy shouted, rising from her seat and slamming the table. He's my only son, how dare you try to take him from me? Her anger quickly turned to venom as she glared at Mary. This marriage is a joke. Mary isn't worthy of David. We are of a different class. We help people like you, not the other way around. Wendy's words grew more unhinged, but I remained calm. Why are you so obsessed with social status, Wendy? I asked. I work with many wealthy clients, but those truly born into wealth don't act like you. Only those who've recently come into money seem this insecure. Wendy's composure faltered, her hands trembling. Don't compare me to those people, she hissed. I was born into wealth. Your actions say otherwise. What are you so afraid of? At the word afraid, Wendy froze. David told me you grew up being told you weren't good enough, because you were a girl, I continued. Her lips trembled. So what? I was born a girl in a family where only men mattered. I had to marry an older man just to preserve my family's status. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, and the truth of her obsession finally came to light. That's why you're so fixated on David being the heir. But if he marries Mary, your family's perfect lineage will be mixed with a... Shut up, Wendy shouted, cutting me off. Enough. The room fell silent as David's father, Brian, entered, pushed in a wheelchair by his son. Though still recovering, he had received special permission to leave the hospital for this meeting. Wendy's face turned ashen. No, you misunderstood, she stammered, her voice unsteady. I never thought marrying you was humiliating. You were just what? Brian interrupted with a weary sigh. Dad says he's divorcing you, Mom, David said, his voice firm. Divorce? Wendy's voice broke. No, please, say something, Brian. But Brian remained silent, refusing even to look at her. Sorry to interrupt, Mary said, her voice calm yet cutting, but we've finalized all the necessary paperwork. Wendy flinched at Mary's words, visibly nervous. Oh, and by the way, Mary added, I own a significant amount of stock in your company. Wendy's eyes widened. What? That's impossible. Actually, it's true, Mary continued. I've held a substantial amount of shares in your company for quite some time. Realization dawned on Wendy's face as she pieced the truth together. Wait, were you that anonymous investor? That's right, Mary said with a small smile. But how? How could a poor family like yours invest that much? Wendy demanded, her voice rising with disbelief. I've been running my late husband's company ever since he passed away, I said calmly, and Mary has helped me manage it. We decided to sell all the shares we hold in your company. Wendy's face turned ghostly pale. No, please don't do that. If you sell now, the company will collapse under its debt. And after you're out of the picture, I'll buy back the shares, David interjected. You've been embezzling money from the company, haven't you, Mom? No, that's not true, Wendy protested, her voice shrill. I was just borrowing a little. I plan to pay it back. Even if you're the owner, you can't use company funds for personal reasons, David said coldly. You could face criminal charges. Wendy was at a loss, unable to defend herself. I've looked into everything, Mom. You've been dealing with shady loan sharks, haven't you? Tears streamed down Wendy's face. I didn't have a choice. I'll pay them back, just don't sell the shares. It's too late for that, David said firmly. From now on, you're no longer the head of the company. Please don't do this. I'll lose everything, Wendy pleaded desperately. David's face remained impassive. Mom, you've always seen me as a tool, not as your son. No, that's not true. I love you, David. If that's true, then tell me, what's my favorite food? Wendy fell silent, unable to answer. See, David said quietly, you don't even know. I'm just a tool to you. Now you'll have to fend for yourself. After David severed ties with her, Wendy's life spiraled out of control. Shunned by her family, she was left to face the consequences of her actions. David quickly removed her from her position as head of the company and appointed a new CEO. Wendy was sued for embezzlement and faced both criminal and civil charges. Desperate to escape her debts and legal troubles, she fled town, only to be arrested for theft. She was sentenced to prison, where she served her time alone. Not a single family member visited her. Meanwhile, David and Mary quietly began their new life together. They held a small, private wedding with close family in attendance. One day, Mary invited me to a baseball game, just like old times. On the way home, she handed me a black and white photograph. Mom, she said with a smile, you're going to be a grandmother. I haven't told David yet. I wanted you to be the first to know. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the picture. I'm so happy we could go to the game together, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Next time, let's bring the whole family. Mary nodded. From a distance, I watched my daughter, her husband, and my newborn grandchild. What seemed like an ordinary day was, for us, a moment filled with joy and meaning. When my relatives saw the beautifully arranged quality meat courses delivered, they all exclaimed, wow, that looks delicious, this is so fancy. But in front of me, there was only a solitary cup of tea. My mother-in-law peeked out from behind the door, grinning in a sly, almost childish way. How typical, I thought. Even today, she couldn't resist trying to torment me. I blurted out, it's been so long since the family got together. Delicious food should be enjoyed by everyone in the family, right? But her food grudges were legendary, and I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. My name is Sarah, I'm 35 years old, and I work in an office. I live with my husband, Jake, who is the youngest of 3 brothers. Jake is kind, easygoing, and we've been married for 5 years. We don't have kids yet, but I've recently started trying to get pregnant. Every time I see my mother-in-law, she pesters me with, still no grandkids? I've been carefully watching my sleep, nutrition, and timing, but there's one thing holding me back. I'll likely need her help if I have a child. She's almost 66, divorced, and living alone, but she's still active and works part-time. Despite that, it's clear she despises me. To her, I'm the woman who stole her precious youngest son. Once, when Jake and I visited her, he stepped away to use the bathroom. The moment he left, she shot me a sharp look and said, Sarah, hasn't Jake gained weight? I shook my head. I don't think so. Oh, he definitely has. It's your duty to keep your husband healthy. If he gains weight, he'll get sick. What are you feeding him? Greasy junk food? I was dumbfounded. I try to prepare balanced meals. And besides, I can't control what Jake eats at work or when he's out with friends. Maybe it would be more effective to mention this to him directly, I said, trying to stay calm. What? That would hurt his feelings. It's your job to look after him. I sighed inwardly. Do I really have to babysit a grown man? When Jake returned, I asked him outright, honey, have you gained weight recently? Huh? No, actually, I've lost a little, he said. The air froze. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as she snapped. Lost weight? Sarah, are you starving him? She suddenly flipped her accusation, claiming I wasn't feeding him enough. Jake looked bewildered. Mom, that's not true. Everything's fine. But she was relentless. If people start gossiping that you're a terrible wife because Jake looks too skinny, it'll be your fault. Sarah. I was speechless. Whether Jake gains or loses weight, I'm the one getting blamed. The tea-only dinners. Visiting her house for dinner is no better. She insists we come over often, so we do, mostly out of politeness. She serves beautifully plated seasonal dishes, fresh raw fish, seasonal vegetables, warm corn soup, and fried rice. Everyone is served, except me. All I get is a cup of tea. Once, I tried to clarify. I didn't say I wasn't hungry. Oh, but you said you didn't want anything, didn't you? She said, feigning innocence. I didn't say that. Well, sorry, I must have misunderstood. You know, I'm just an old lady. At first, I believed her, but the pattern repeated every time. She'd apologize with her classic line, "I'm just a forgetful old woman," leaving me unable to call her out without looking petty. Finally, I had enough. After being served only tea for the third time, I stood up. "Let me help you, Mom," I said, heading to the kitchen. I served myself some rice and soup and then sat down, grabbing a few side dishes from Jake's plate. She frowned. "Sarah, I told you to stay out of the kitchen, and now you're taking your husband's food?" I smiled sweetly. "Your cooking is just so delicious." I couldn't resist. Jake looked uncomfortable, but finally spoke up. "Come on, Mom, this isn't like you. There's no reason to give Sarah a hard time." "Oh, no, it's not like that," she stammered. "It was just an old habit. I must have miscounted." Her excuse was weak, and I was now sure her actions were deliberate. Turning the tables, the next time we visited, she prepared chicken and eggs for the main course, foods I couldn't eat because of allergies. When I stared at my cup of tea, wondering what to do, Jake stepped in. "Mom, you remember Sarah can't eat chicken and eggs, right? Did you make something else for her?" Caught off guard, she stammered. "Oh, of course, I thought I'd order takeout for her." "Sarah, pick whatever you'd like." I smiled. "Thank you, I'll have fries." Her face twitched, but she couldn't back out. When the fries arrived late, I savored them, ignoring her displeasure. Small victories like these remind me to stay resilient. One day, I'll do more than just hold my ground. I'll teach her that respect goes both ways. I slightly regretted ordering fries. I knew my mother-in-law wouldn't let it slide and would probably make some snide comment like, "Fries are for children." I also decided not to mention that I could eat eggs as long as they weren't raw. There was no point in giving her ammunition. The petty battle between us continued. Once, I proudly brought over some homemade dishes under the guise of sharing. I prepared seasoned rice and simmered vegetables, packing them neatly in a container. I thought, if there's no meal for me, at least I can eat this. But my mother-in-law was one step ahead. "Why did you bring something so dirty?" she asked, frowning in exaggerated disgust. "Dirty?" I was taken aback. "The rice and vegetables, everything's brown. You should think about presentation," she sneered, sounding like a self-proclaimed aristocrat. "But it's delicious," I countered. "I came up with the recipe myself." "You really have no taste," she said bluntly, so careless and no sense of refinement at all. For some reason, this time she didn't hold back and insulted me outright. Then, as if to add insult to injury, she picked up my container and dumped its contents into the trash. "It had gone bad," she said with a dismissive wave. My anger boiled over. "That's not possible." At that moment, Jake walked in. "What's going on? Why are you shouting?" My mother-in-law's fierce expression instantly morphed into a sweet smile. "Oh, Sarah's cooking had gone bad, so I threw it out." Jake frowned. "That's too bad, it's usually so tasty." "Tasty? That brown food?" she muttered under her breath. I was livid. Wasting food is something I simply cannot forgive. That day, as usual, I had only tea. I drank it down defiantly while my mother-in-law smirked, clearly enjoying my frustration. A festive family gathering. A week later, we all gathered for my niece's birthday. Jake's 3 brothers, their families, and several relatives we hadn't seen since our wedding were there. The atmosphere was lively, with laughter and chatter filling the air. The tables were pushed together in the recreation room, creating a long banquet setup. My mother-in-law spared no expense for the occasion. The table was lavishly set with appetizers, soup, salad, steak, mashed potatoes, and desserts, all restaurant-quality dishes. Everyone marveled at the spread, exclaiming, "Wow, this looks amazing, and so luxurious." Pleased with the praise, my mother-in-law said, "I indulged, because it's been so long since the whole family got together. Let's enjoy these delicious dishes together." But at my seat, as always, there was only tea. My mother-in-law peeked out from behind a sliding door, smirking at me. Even on such a joyous occasion, she found a way to torment me. I felt conflicted. If I pointed out the lack of food at my place, the relatives, unaware of her antics, might offer to share their dishes, which would only give her an excuse to say, "Oh, I must have forgotten, silly me," and then, she'd likely whisper behind my back, "Sarah's so greedy." As I sipped my tea, anger bubbled inside me. I wanted her to admit her pettiness and apologize. Instead, she continued smirking, relishing my discomfort. Finally, I stood up. "Thank you for the meal. It seems I'm not considered family, so I'll be leaving now. Please, everyone, enjoy yourselves." The room fell silent. The relatives exchanged confused glances, whispering to each other. "What's going on? Is something wrong?" someone asked. Feigning innocence, my mother-in-law tilted her head. "Oh my, what's the matter, Sarah?" "There's no meal for me," I said plainly. Her face shifted to mock surprise. "Oh, dear, what should we do? How careless of me." "Come on, what are you talking about? You knew exactly what you were doing," I said, my voice cold. Calmly, she walked over with a tray. "Here it is, I just forgot to put it at your seat. No need to make such a fuss," she said with a smug smile. I looked down at the tray, and my stomach sank. It wasn't the steak and sides everyone else had. Instead, it was filled with egg salad, thick omelets, and pudding, all things I couldn't eat due to my egg allergy. My hands trembled. This was deliberate. Jake noticed and stepped in. "Mother, this is terrible. You know Sarah's allergic to eggs." Feigning shock, she gasped. "Oh my, I didn't order this. Could the restaurant have made a mistake?" I was seething but kept my composure. At that moment, my niece peeked at the egg-filled tray and exclaimed, "Can I have some?" The children at the table, not too fond of rare steak, eagerly traded their meat courses for the egg dishes. Now, in front of me was a plate of perfectly cooked steak and sides. "Well, then," I said with a smile, picking up my knife and fork, "thank you for the food." Before I could take a bite, my mother-in-law interjected, "Hold on, you must not know this, so let me teach you. Normally, daughters-in-law only eat the appetizers." Her words echoed through the room. I froze, my knife and fork still in hand. Finally, she had revealed her true colors. Taking advantage of the silence, she snatched the meat courses away from me and scolded, "And you shouldn't give your food to the children. They need to eat everything, including their steaks." Her malicious smile sent chills down my spine. The other daughters-in-law exchanged uneasy glances and began to apologize. "I'm sorry for eating the steak, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law. I'm sorry for drinking the soup, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law. And I'm sorry for eating the mashed potatoes, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law." The sight of them apologizing one after another shook the room. No, that's not what I meant," my mother-in-law stammered. "When I said daughter-in-law, I meant Sarah." The daughters-in-law looked at her coldly. "We're daughters-in-law too. Does that mean we're not recognized as family either?" My mother-in-law's face flushed as she struggled to explain. I took a deep breath and addressed the room. "Mother always serves me tea, nothing else, every single time we visit. It's because I'm not considered part of the family, but treating me like this, knowing I have an egg allergy, that's too much." The relatives began murmuring in disapproval. My mother-in-law's carefully crafted image started to crumble as she tried, and failed, to come up with an excuse. "Oh, I completely forgot about your allergy, Sarah. I could have sworn you liked eggs, but maybe I was mistaken," my mother-in-law stammered, her tone full of false innocence. "But you just said you didn't order this, didn't you?" I replied sharply, my frustration bubbling over. "Did I say that? Did I really?" she mumbled, her web of lies beginning to unravel. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? You've always been like this." My husband, Jake, interjected, his voice cold and steady. The accusation made her visibly pale. "Stop it, Mom, this isn't right," Jake continued, his disappointment evident. "It's not like that at all," she cried, desperately trying to deny her actions, but it was too late. The truth hung heavy in the room. "So, you never really considered Sarah part of the family," Jake said, his voice, though calm, carried a weight that silenced everyone. "Then I guess I'm not family either. Sorry for thinking I was all this time." Her face crumpled as her sons exchanged incredulous glances. Jake's brothers chimed in. "Mom, what's going on? Are you harassing Sarah like this?" one of them asked. "No, it's just Sarah," she blurted out, a slip of the tongue that exposed her true intentions. Her panic was palpable. The relatives, sensing the shift in tone, began finishing their meals and quietly leaving the table. The daughters-in-law, one by one, placed money on the table as if signaling their resignation from the farce. My mother-in-law's demeanor crumbled further. I didn't mean for it to come out that way," she stammered, her voice trembling, "but the damage was done." The egg courses sat untouched before me, their presence a silent reminder of her petty cruelty. I glanced at them, then at Jake, who gave me a small nod. I picked up my fork. "This is delicious," I declared after taking a bite. "The aroma of the omelet is irresistible." My voice was light, but my words carried weight. "Sarah, stop eating that," my mother-in-law shrieked, trying to snatch the plate away. Jake grabbed her arm, his voice firm. Mom, you need to apologize for everything. If it wasn't Sarah, it could have been someone else, and they might not have stayed as strong. Her bitterness twisted her face, and she finally snapped. Yes, I knew about her allergy. I didn't like her. She took my last son away from me. The room fell silent, her confession echoing loudly. I wasn't ready to let him go, she continued, her voice cracking. I wanted him to stay here, with me, where I could take care of him. Jake's expression darkened. Mom, I'm 40 years old. What did you expect? For me to live here until I was 50? 60? Her protest was feeble, and any sympathy she might have garnered evaporated. The conversation was interrupted by a cheerful voice at the door. It was the delivery man, here to collect the trays. Oh, I didn't realize this was your house, he said to me, surprised. I thought it was just another delivery. I smiled politely. It's my in-laws' house, but I recognized your restaurant's dishes right away from the taste. I've been a frequent customer. My mother-in-law's confusion grew as she listened. Wait, what do you mean? She asked, her voice faltering. I said, meeting her gaze. I've been stopping by his restaurant because you never prepare food for me. The delivery man, oblivious to the tension, chuckled. Oh, so this is the famous mother-in-law I've heard about, the one who forgets her daughter-in-law's meals. Her face turned ashen. That's enough, she snapped, trying to shut the door on him, but the damage was already done. Jake sighed, looking at her with a mix of disappointment and resolve. Mom, you've always wanted us to come over, but I think it's best if we don't visit anymore. Don't say that, she cried, her voice desperate. Just come, even if it's only you. Jake shook his head. No, Mom, my wife is my family, and if she's not welcome, neither am I. Her protests faded into silence as we left the house together. From that day forward, Jake's brothers and their wives also began to distance themselves. It turned out they'd been mistreated in similar ways but had remained silent out of fear or resignation. Despite her attempts to contact Jake secretly, he stood firm. Mom, I don't need your cooking anymore, and I won't be coming back for a while, he told her. Over time, the bonds between her and her family frayed, her actions leaving her isolated. Meanwhile, Jake and I looked forward to a brighter, happier chapter, one built on mutual respect, love, and, of course, delicious meals shared as a family.